Hello everyone, Crow Ravel here, and this is my updated FTL ship tier list. I will be talking about ship strengths, weaknesses, first thing to upgrade, and how you generally want to scale with those ships. And the rankings are predominantly going to be based on two factors: early survivability and the ease of scaling. Let's begin. The first ship we're going to talk about is the Kestrel A. Now, the strength of the Kestrel A are its weapons. It has a Burst Laser 2, the best purchasable weapon in the game, as well as an Artemis missile, the best missile weapon in the game. The Burst Laser 2 works with everything: ions, flaks, beam weapons, and so it's incredibly versatile. And the Artemis missile gives you the ability to do 2 damage to enemy ships, despite the fact that you've already taken 2 damage to your own ship, and that they even have 5 shield bubbles. The Artemis missile provides a lot of early safety on this particular ship. Now, there really aren't glaring weaknesses. There's not like an Achilles heel or anything on this ship, but outside of the weapons, there really isn't a lot to write about. There are no systems. You generally aren't going to get crew kills or generate extra scrap. You don't even have augments to sell. So you are going to have to foot the bill for quite a bit. The first upgrade we want on this ship is to get the shields. Getting a shield buffer into a second shield bubble, just to try and prevent any death spirals. A death spiral just being that normally it starts with your shields being hit and you being vulnerable to either environmental hazards, rapid fire weapons, whatever the case is. Once you've gotten your shield upgraded, the next thing you really want to look for is a weapon, just something that pairs with the Burst Laser 2, which is generally any weapon. Though hacking and even teleporter are okay substitutes. I would actually put this ship in the A tier, because, as I said, it doesn't really have a glaring weakness, and it has the Artemis to try and keep it safe in the early sector. And a lot of stuff works with the weapons and some available options of, just like I said, teleporter is an acceptable idea early on to go with. Next up is the Engi A. Now, the Engi A is a little funny in that it's pretty good for the first 2 sectors. The Ion Blast Mark II is able to pin down enemy shields, but more importantly, pin down enemy weapons. In combination with a combat drone, you actually use the drone to hit the enemy shield bubbles, and then create the window for your Ion to hit them in their weapons, and thus disabling their weapons, keeping your ship safe. And normally there will still be enough opportunities that the drone will do damage to the enemy ships. Some other benefits of the ship are also the fact that you have Engi crew, so they tend to be able to fix things. Again, try to prevent death spirals. You can get a little bit of extra money with crew kills by hitting the O2 systems of crewed ships. And you do have an augment to sell, as well as the combat drone. Now, the problems with this ship start with the fact that the Ion Blast is a 3-powered weapon, which means if you get hit in the weapons, your offense basically is turned off. The other problem is trying to find something that works with an Ion Mark II is tricky. Ion Stunner, Blast, Charge Ion are all very good candidates, but like 3-powered weapons are not really great. Trying to scale up to weapon 6 is going to be very difficult. A Flak 1, which is a common weapon, is also not really a reliable source of targeted damage. So even though it's a really good weapon, it doesn't quite pair with the Ion Mark II. What often happens with this ship is trying to transition away from sort of the Ion and drone build because you don't have the targeted damage, because going through 1 shield bubble with the Ion is not a Herculean task, but trying to go through 3-4 shield bubbles, cloaking systems, high level of evasion, it starts becoming a problem. So as I said, what you end up doing is kind of selling off everything and trying to find 2 weapons. So the transition is not great, and you can kind of take a lot of chip damage because you just get hit in your own weapons. This is another ship where we want to upgrade our shield system immediately. Try and keep you safe, and that also increases the opportunity that you will be able to safely get a crew kill against an enemy ship, maybe get a little bit of money. And then afterwards, you really are trying to find an additional weapon. If you find an ion weapon, that's great. It doesn't mean you have to stick with ions the whole way. It's just going to give you something better going up against 2 shielded ships. But if you find some, like a burst 1, burst 2, charge 1, that's a pretty acceptable thing. And you can also pick up hacking in the hopes that it makes more weapon options available. Just like, oh, like if you found like a beam weapon, it's like, okay, well, I have hacking, so I can now just hack their shields and fire the beam weapon instead of trying to go for, like I said, a 6 power weapon system for like a halberd beam. So I put the Engi A in C tier. It doesn't tend to die in Sector 1, but it can be very difficult to really get it off the ground and, like I said, just win the run throughout the mid-game. I think my last 3 runs with this ship have been just messes and a half. One of them actually ended up being a boarding ship. So, yeah, you get stuck in C tier when you have a really terrible transition and kind of some general wonkiness in the early game. Like I said, just that you get hit in the weapons and you're just sitting there for a while. Next up is the Federation A. Hey, the Federation A has that burst laser too we all know and love. Again, best purchasable weapon in the game. Works with all the other weapons. We do have 4 crew on this ship, including an Engi, so repairs don't tend to be a problem. And you do have an artillery beam. Now, the artillery system is the worst system in the game, but it does provide you with some semblance of offense. So if you are forced to go into sort of like a defensive turtling build, you have an option, which is better than having no option. Just be mindful that you can use your artillery to like try and stop ships from running away or to help facilitate a weak offense, though generally speaking, you do not build into this system. The weaknesses on this ship are that weapon system. It is an only 2 powered weapon system, so if you are hit in the weapons, your weapons stop functioning. And if you are powering the artillery, which you should be, that's still 50 seconds before it does anything. It's very easy to get hit in the weapons at the start, try and get them repaired and get them back online, get hit in the shields, and then things kind of go out of control. Furthermore, having only 1 weapon means if ships are trying to run away, it's really difficult to kind of keep a cascading amount of damage to keep them tied up in repairs or to keep systems offline. There's nothing sellable on this ship. I mean, maybe you sell the burst laser too because you have a one-shot build, but really there's nothing that you can sell. Maybe some arguments made about rolling crew for, say, like the piloting event. But you're going to have to pay for everything. The first upgrade that we get on this ship is the shield buffer into a shield bubble. Some people go with the weapon buffer. As I said, getting hit in the weapons is really bad. I disagree with this because I feel like I'm still going to be vulnerable to the shield hacking event. Hazards can be really, really awful if the shields go down. Offensive drones can be really bad in those situations as well. So people who get that buffer point in weapons then just start getting a buffer point in the shield system. However, if I upgrade my shield system, I feel like I don't really need the buffer point in weapons. It may come if I have like 80 scrap and floating after the buffer point. Like, okay, well, you know, just to keep my options open. But that's like feels like it's more down the line of the road. So in my mind, it just makes more sense to get the buffer or get the shields online since you're going to do that anyways, and then don't really worry about that weapon buffer. Once you get your shields up, though, you are going to be trying to find a weapon to pair with that burst laser. Again, pretty much everything does. Hacking is like an okay fallback, though. At least it gives you something. But yeah, this also ends up in C tier. Just, it's vulnerable early because you can get hit in the weapons, and then transitioning is a little bit messy because you just don't really have the money and you need to buy everything outside of the burst laser too. Next up is the Zoltan A. So the Zoltan A, like all the other Zoltan ships, starts with a Zoltan shield bubble. It's an augment that prevents you from taking damage. You cannot be hacked, mind controlled, and non-event borders. They can't get on your ship. So the enemy has to deal some damage to the Zoltan shield before you have to even deal with any of that stuff. And this generally is going to keep you safe in most fights. It's actually why you don't upgrade shields on this ship until the start of Sector 3. Your weapons are a halberd beam and a leto. Halberd beam is an incredibly powerful weapon. It has the ability to severely damage enemy ships, if not outright kill them. It's incredibly disruptive. You also have a leto, which gives you the ability to tag enemy weapons before most of them even have a chance of firing, so it creates safe fights, and also gives you an option to potentially hit shields in, say, Sector 3 to try and get your halberd beam through. Now, the weaknesses on this ship is that the halberd beam does need help. It can't get through 2 shielded ships on its own. You really don't want to rely on the leto, because enemy shields could have, like, buffers, or it could just miss, being one shot. Or they could have a defense drone, whatever. And you want something to essentially pair along with the halberd beam, as I said, to like set it up to suppress enemy shields to get it through. And if you don't get it by Sector 3, it can get a little sticky on this ship. That's generally about it, though, as far as weaknesses go. You're not great at putting out fires. The ship is a little big. It's worth noting that. Oh, I'm sorry. Also, you don't get, like, buffer, or there's not a lot of extra money on this ship. You're not getting crew kills. Halberd beam is one of the worst crew-killing weapons. I'm sure you got bio beam swipes you can do with it, but in reality, you're really not getting crew kills. You're not really selling anything. Though you can sell the Zoltan shield. It is 40 scrap, and if that gets me hacking and cloaking, and those are, like, the last pieces I need for victory, then I'm going to sell it. Upgrading on this ship, the first thing we actually want to upgrade, as I said, where you don't want to upgrade shields. We want to upgrade weapons. 35 scrap gives you a weapon buffer, and this is really helpful in a couple situations. One, against Zoltan shields, you can now fire the leto, do 1 damage to their shield, and then you can do the swipe with the halberd beam, where the end of its beam pathing lands in weapons. Halberd beam will do 4 damage to the Zoltan shields, and then that last tick of the beam should deal damage to their weapons. That's a really good play to make. It also means that you can take 1 damage to weapons and your halberd beam is still functioning. It is slow. It is 17 seconds. That does take time. I guess that's another weakness, is if they get through your Zoltan shield, and again with the scaling thing, things can go bad because you can get hit before you can fire it. So like I said, buffer point lets you fire the leto, lets you take a damage. You can even take an ion damage because they'll just take the leto offline instead. After you get that buffer point in weapons, you're just going to be trying to find a weapon, or you're going to try to fight hacking just to keep up the ship scaling, and then just kind of go through there, or go from there, and have a pretty traditional weapon ship. Zoltan A ends up in the A tier, and it's pretty difficult to kill you off early. Even if you do have some bad fights, like, you know, your Zoltan shield goes down, you still have that leto to keep on firing just to try and kill off the enemy ships, or just keep their weapons offline till you can recover. So it's tough to die early, and it has, like I said, just the little scaling thing, because most weapon ships deal, like with 2 shielded ships, like they can deal damage to them. You still have the leto. But yeah, you get to land in A tier with this kind of a layout. Next up, the Stealth A. So first we're going to talk about the Stealth A's weapons. It has a dual laser, which is a fantastically strong weapon. 1 power, 2 shots, so you can take down 2 shields. And it also has a mini beam, which is a 1 power weapon that deals 2 to 4 damage. It also can start fires. These are incredibly efficient weapons. I mean, 2 power, able to deal potentially 5 damage to an enemy ship. I guess it's 6 if they don't have a shield bubble. Is pretty absurd. And it's not uncommon to just pick up a flak in hacking and just be done with your weapon system. The ship also has cloaking, long-range scanners, and an augment to sell. Cloaking is a really powerful system, and it lets you, get 60% more evasion for a time period, so you can avoid incoming damage. Sometimes you can just use it as a buffer, like you can pre-cloak to prevent various shenanigans. It also lets you dive early, which can help you generate money. Long-range scanners is something else that generates money, though more importantly, long-range scanners is avoiding hazards, because hazards are really bad on this ship, which we'll get into. You also have an augment and titanium system casing, which you can sell, so you get a little bit of bonus money. You're not going to get like crew kills with this ship, but generally it does generate additional money because once you sort of get like hacking, you can just start diving throughout the rest of the sectors, and you're not going to have to invest a whole lot of money in your offense in most runs. So what is the weakness on this ship? It has a pretty glaring weakness. It doesn't have a shield system. So if you are forced into a hazard, it's just a choke point. If you deal with an offensive drone, particularly something scary like a Beam 2, or you just miss your first 2 shots with your dual lasers, and now you're just susceptible to taking the next volley of damage from the enemy ship because you already used your cloaking, or maybe your cloaking, which is I think 90% with your level 4 engines, just didn't quite get the job done and you got hit anyways. You can become very vulnerable to a lot of damage very quickly. Yeah. So the upgrade on this ship is, in fact, just upgrading your weapons. Getting out of fights quickly is the biggest strength. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. The fact that your weapons can take a damage and stay online, it's 25 scrap, so it's very, very affordable, and your weapons are just able to keep on firing until you can just get through. Because, generally speaking, in Sector 1, once you get through an enemy shield system, they're not going to last very long. And you still have the augment to sell. You have actually a couple store options. A few people seem uncomfortable with the idea of spending this money because they want to buy shields, which is a pretty significant scrap investment. I guarantee you, avoiding taking ship damage, avoiding spiral damage for 25 scrap is well worth the investment. Now, after we get that buffer point in shields, we're generally just going to farm around until we find a store, and we want to either buy shields. Shields primarily is the first thing we want to buy there, and we can sell our augment. You can sell long-range scanners to get a shield bubble online. Now, hacking and weapons are also potential options as well. Because with hacking, you can hack enemy weapons, and with the cloaking, sort of just lock enemies out of their weapons. So that's very safe. Getting another quick weapon online, flak 1, burst 2, charge 1, those kinds of things. Even a heavy laser or an ion blast. Just better ensuring that you don't miss on your first volley also provides actually a lot of security as well. And, means that you can deal with more shielded ships. So those are really those are your options as far as upgrades go. Stealth A sort of lands in the same category as the Zoltan A. We have, like I said, we have efficient weapons. We have a little bit better scrap gaining because of, the potential of diving. But like I said, if you're once you get vulnerable, like if in those situations, you can take a significant amount of damage and things can go quite badly. But it very, very rarely happens. The ship doesn't take a lot of money to win. It gets a lot of extra money. Again, like for A tier, we're just talking like ships that just like calculable, like seeable bad RNG can happen in like end of run. Like it still is pretty extreme. It's pretty unlikely, but you know, they do have like a notable vulnerability. C tier kind of just like either much more vulnerable or as we start talking about like is that like a real glaring weakness. But we're going over on a ship by ship basis. Next up, speaking of glaring weaknesses, we got the Rock A. So the best thing about the Rock A is that it starts with an Artemis missile, which is, we said before and we'll say again, the best missile weapon in the game. We have a 3-powered weapon system, so the Artemis missile should basically keep being live and able to disable enemy ships. You also have a hull missile as well as rock plating, and those sell for a considerable amount of money. I think it's like 72 scrap. That's it. The weaknesses on this ship is that it's very missile reliant. As I said, you only have the hull missile and the Artemis missile, which means you just inevitably will run out of missiles if you just try to like run those the entire time. So you're on this timer to find an alternative to your offense, which is in itself kind of scary, and it makes fights a little bit more complicated because you have to sort of do a cost-benefit analysis of like, how many missiles is it going to take to get through this fight, and how much scrap is it going to generate? Is that worth it or not? The other significant problem with the ship is your crew are very slow. You have 3 rock crew, and the ship layout isn't great because it has that, you know, solid wall in the middle of the ship. Which means, like, if you get hit in the shield system early on, things go south very quickly. It takes a long time for your crew to get there. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Maybe the crew we normally start in engines should be in shields just to have somebody there to just immediately start repairing it. If you just get a little bit unlucky with some Artemis misses. Gosh, misses hurt on this ship. Now, as far as the early upgrades on this ship, I recommend going for a shield buffer first. Like, once you get to this 20 scrap, get to the shield buffer. And then you're going to want to get to 48 scrap before you get the second shield bubble. The other idea is that you wait until you have 38 scrap before you buy the buffer. The 18 scrap is so you can buy teleporter, right? 18 scrap plus the 2 sellables, the hull missile, and the plating buys you a teleporter, which is generally the best offensive improvement you can buy on the ship. I feel that the slow crew and the early vulnerability, you should get that buffer in the shield system. Other players, like I said, they wait until they have the 18 scrap surplus before they do it. I couldn't tell you which one is going to get you killed versus another one in however many scenarios. I don't know. Just like from personal experience, I feel like that's what I do in that scenario. So once you get that shield and that shield buffer, or once you get the shield buffer or shield, the thing you're looking for, generally you are trying to find a teleporter. Artemis missile, 2 rock borders, can do a lot of work. It's very efficient. Then you can start generating more money. This is a ship that, like I said, outside of selling things, doesn't really generate money. So it gives you that option. You could find a weapon if they don't have a teleporter, or you just didn't have enough scrap when you got to a store, because you also needed to do a bunch of repairs, perhaps. And then hacking is also kind of like a fallback. It's not great. You know, there might be scenarios where you're like hacking weapons just to buy time, or trying to ensure that your missiles land so it's more efficient. But generally, you really like want a teleporter. It's like the best scaling option. Rock A goes in D tier. It has the early vulnerability. It has a very fatal flaw in that you're only reliant on missiles, and the scaling on the ship is wonky. So yeah, get into the D tier. Next we have is the Slug A. So the Slug A positives are the weapons. You have 3 starting weapons. You have a dual laser, which is again very, very powerful weapon. 1 power for 2 shots. I did it again. Don't bother with it. Don't ignore the description on it. It's actually a very good weapon you want to keep the rest of the game. You also have a breach bomb, which is a 100% chance to breach. It also deals 1 system damage and 30 crew damage. And you have an anti-bio beam. So operating with the dual lasers and the breach bomb means you're going to have a buffer point in your weapon system. It's a little bit of extra security. And that's what you want to start with, because you want a breach bomb to land in their weapons to slow them down enough that you can start using the anti-bio beam and kill off their crew to try and, you know, generate hopefully more scrap. And generate scrap this ship does. You do have crew killing, as well as you have so many sellable items. You have the slug repair gel, you have the anti-bio beam, and then potentially even the breach bomb if you need to. As far as weaknesses, the 2 that come to mind are just the fact that you do only start with 2 crew. So you have a slug pilot, and I would put a slug in weapons, because you want your weapons to be able to fire and get that first volley to try and land, disable enemy weapons, make the fight safe as fast as possible, at least safer fast as possible. But having only 2 crew means that repairs can be tricky and a little bit slow. You might have to pull both your crew to try and repair things. Fires can be very bad, and it does take a lot of bad RNG where it's like you have to get hit in the weapons, or you have to get hit in the shields, and then your weapons have to miss, and then you kind of get hit in the weapons, and then things spiral. It's a very unlikely scenario, but it can happen. The other thing is just kind of like how the ship scales. We have all this potential money, but in terms of weapons you hold on to, it's just like the dual laser and then sort of the breach bomb. It's not like the most ideal thing because it doesn't deal actual hull damage. It is disruptive, but you're really trying to find like another weapon to get online. That's not a super reliable way to deal damage through like 2 shielded ships. So there is an emphasis to try and like find a weapon early. It's not like, it generally doesn't feel awful because like I said, you're going to get money and you have a lot of sellables. So if shops have weapons, you're good to go. But, or if you just get them from crew kills, even better. It is just a little bit wonky. Slug A is one of the 20. We upgrade our shield system as soon as possible. It also makes getting crew kills significantly safer, which is what we want. And then, kind of as we already discussed with the scaling, you want to find a weapon first and foremost. Hacking is an okay fallback. So Slug A actually kind of goes into the B tier. Like, it has all this money, but it just kind of misses out on some of the stronger scaling options that we find in A tier. And it has just like that little like extra vulnerability where Stealth A, of course, has it because it has like no shield, but it just has so much other stuff going for it. This is like this is probably like a little bit safer, but much more scaling problem-wise. Ranking ships is tough. Inherently, there's some arbitrary elements to it. But you can look at people's win streaks with Stealth A and go, oh yeah, most people like that ship. The problems with the ship are not ones you're going to notice very often when played correctly. Next up, the Mantis A. So the strength of the Mantis A, we'll start with the fact that it is a teleporter, small bomb, and Mantis crew. There's 3 Mantis and 1 Engi. The Mantis are the second best boarders in the game, so you can teleport over, murder the enemy crew. I mean, you can even take out 3 humans with 2 Mantis. It's generally not a problem. And then you have the small bomb, which is a perfect support weapon for boarding. You don't have to worry about defense drones. You can hit enemy weapons to make fights safer, or you can hit their medical units to end fights more quickly. And this is also, of course, going to generate more money because you're getting crew kills. You can also sell the augment and get more money. And there is an Engi that can fix things, even you're going to be a little bit light on crew since you're sending them over to board. Though you are going to have to be, versatile with boarding strategies. The weaknesses on this ship are that the weapon is slow. Small bomb is slow compared to most of the early sector weapons, so it's very possible it gets sniped. And against something like aggressive auto ships or ships with a Zoltan shield, that could be a problem. You really don't have very strong options against those 2 particular layouts. A lot of boarding ships don't. And like I said, that can rear its ugly head, and you should start taking a bunch of damage while, trying to get your shields going. I guess we'll talk about the fact that, the weapon scaling is off on this ship as well. I was going to talk about... Anyways, the weapon scaling is a little bit off because you only have 3 weapon slots. And you're like, all right, well, I want the small bomb because that supports my boarding. So then I have 2 weapon slots, which are what? Like, you've got, 2 burst laser 2s. Awesome, that's fantastic. Yeah, that really works. But there aren't a lot of weapon systems, like 2 weapons that you can, kind of pair up that really sort of function. Because you have that slot dedicated to small bomb. So the weapon scaling can be a little bit wonky, and of course your weapons are already weak because they're only at level 1, so you have to spend 40 scrap to even upgrade them. The one other note is that your ship layout is very large and it's like tunnel. What I mean is that if you get a hack to your engines or you get a hack to your piloting, you have to generally fight through 2 doors to get anywhere. It's really annoying. And like I said, if something breaks on your ship, it is a mile apart. Your oxygen burns down. You got to run your Engi from weapons. That can take a really long time to get there. The first upgrade that you want on this ship, though, is going to be the upgrading of the shields. Try and get yourself as safe as possible, as fast as possible, and the shield is what does that. Once you get your shields online, you're going to be trying to look for some sort of option kind of helpful against auto ships or Zoltan shields. So that could be a weapon, just some more projectile weapons. It does start with a basic laser. You don't want to really lean on it, but it can get the job done. I would hesitate to upgrade weapons. I see that it happens. There could be an argument to do it against a Sector 2 Zoltan sector. I could see that making sense. But generally speaking, just take the time, take the losses of maybe small bombs missing and that being really annoying and fights being longer. You don't want to waste 40 scrap upgrading weapons. Just be patient. Like I said, get something that maybe helps you deal with auto ships better, Zoltan ships better, but also just hacking is really strong. It helps support your boarding. I put this also in the B tier, kind of like the same thing, where it's a lot of fights are very, very clean. You just board with 2 Mantis, kill them, go on, get your shields upgraded pretty quickly because you get extra scrap or you sell off the augment and you're just going. No real problem. If you're not tagged in your weapons and your small bomb is active, fights are fine. But Zoltan ships are can be very gross. If you hit that shield hacking event early and stuff starts getting damaged, your other Mantis are not very good at doing repairs. And again, the Engi trying to run around your ship. It can kind of death spiral, and it's weird to try and upgrade or to have a weapon loadout when you only have 3 weapon slots and one of them's dedicated to small bomb. Kestrel A. So the first thing about the Kestrel A are technically the weapons. We're going to see this a lot where I mentioned like how the weapons are a strength but also kind of a weakness, and they will be here as well. These starting weapons can technically deal 2 damage through 3 shields, which is silly, right? We talked about other ships when it's like, well, you know, like once you start seeing 2 shielded ships, the weapons don't feel that really great. And this thing is like, oh, they got 3 shields, that's okay. I can still hit them for 2. The other thing is that you have 4 crew, 2 of them being crystals. Now the ship is big, and crystals aren't great at putting out fires. They have a penalty for that. But normally you're not going to be like death spiral because of that. Oh, I should talk a little bit more about the weapons in that you have this Kestrel Heavy, which has piercing. Both crystal weapons have piercing. They ignore 1 level of shield, and that's why you can deal 2 damage through a 3 shielded ship. And because you have 3 power and weapons, normally this Kestrel Heavy is like all you're going to be relying on. Like that's going to be able to take out enemy ships. And you have, like I said, 2 buffer points for it. So we kind of talked about crew, that we have 4 crew and can fix things even though the ship is pretty large. We also have an augment to sell for 40 scrap, which like that's a ridiculous amount of money to make in a single jump in Sector 1. As far as weaknesses, we are slow. The weapons are a little bit slow. It's possible that other enemy weapons get to fire and hit you in the weapons first, which is not a good thing to happen. Again, we do have the 2 buffer points. Both of our projectile weapons are targetable by Defense Drone 1. So if you run into a DD1, you're going to kind of have to bunch your shots to try and get them past the Defense Drone 1. And also because they have shield piercing, it means that you can't really pair them with beam weapons. Excuse me. Something like a pike or a hull beam just never really will get online unless you have other weapons already established to help them. I mean, you technically can target shields before you get beam weapons. That's an infrequent occurrence. But we also have like the large ship in terms of trying to do repair. But outside of like selling the augment, you're really not getting like bonus scrap with the starting ship stuff. You're not like diving early or anything along those lines. The first upgrade on this ship is shields. Unsurprising. Get it safe by preventing death spirals. Again, first jump store, sell the augment, get that buffer point, and you will feel so secure, so safe. After you get that second shield, just start getting as much scrap as you can get. And then at stores, what you're looking for is a projectile weapon. Flak 1 is great. Some of the burst weapons or charge weapons, charge 1, maybe even a charge 2, those are fine. You can also go teleporter. I would actually rank teleporter over hacking, which you can also get. It's a little bit further down on the list, but not by much, because you have the 2 crystals. And so teleporting with 2 crystals is incredibly powerful, particularly if you learn, like, as you walk a crystal out of a room, the door opens and you hit their lockdown, it leaves the crystalline behind them. So you can use that to sort of lock the enemy out of the room. Which can be, so that, it's like, anyways, it's a boarding technique you should definitely learn to have. So the thing with the Kestrel A in terms of ranking is it's S tier. You have 4 crew. You have weapons that deal damage through 3 shielded ships. You have an augment that you can sell. You find a projectile weapon, you're good to go. You find a teleporter, you're good to go. You have hacking so you can drop their evasion to hit them with your weapons, or just slow their weapons down. You're, again, generally very good to go. While defense drones, are more noticeably annoying against this ship. I mean, not as bad as like this, but I think like the fact that you just have 40 scrap for an early infusion, weapons that can go through basically any defense. I mean, like until like the first 5 sectors of the game. Yeah, this is just S tier. Oh, plus you can go to the Crystal Homeworlds. How cool is that? Next, the Lanius A. So the strength of the Lanius A is that it starts with hacking. Hacking, of course, being a pretty powerful system. Can enable crew kills, but here we're going to use hacking predominantly just to slow down enemy weapons because our starting weapons are slow in themselves. But then hacking, of course, enables us finding other weapons later. It's much easier to get weapon builds when you already have hacking. There is some additional scrap with this particular ship. We have an augment that you can sell. As I said, because you have hacking, you do have some crew killing capabilities. And you also have a, you have a clone bay. As far as weaknesses, the starting weapons are slow. You have a chain laser and you have an ion stunner. So those are very slow weapons. Well, we're waiting on the chain laser at 16 seconds. So enemies are going to fire their weapons first, which is why we hack their weapons to slow it down. You can't really deal damage to 2 different systems. So like ships that try to run away can be an issue, particularly if they're a little bit dodge happy. Though again, hacking can help eliminate that. And that's kind of like it in terms of like general weaknesses of it. The ship is kind of the bigger layout, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, like I said, I think hacking just provides you with so much security. It's much harder to die on ships. Again, why everybody wants hacking on all the runs. First thing you upgrade, shields. Let's get shields online. Once you get that shield bubble going, again, makes crew killing a lot easier. You can just target their O2, blast it to bits, sometimes stun the person trying to even do repairs. And then we're going to be trying to find a weapon. Anything to just kind of speed up. Extra projectile weapons, beam weapons, pretty much anything will work. If we don't find weapons, we already have hacking, so we don't have that fallback. But teleporter could be worth considering. As I said, you already have hacking, so you could board with the 2 Lanius and deal with all the micro of trying to keep their health up, and plus the oxygen being drained from the enemy ship. But it is an option. I'm going to put this bad boy in the A tier. It's possible that like an early volley just kind of like ultra misses and then they fire their weapons and things go bad. Zoltan shielded ships are annoying because you can't hack them, so they do get to fire their weapons first, but you have an answer generally against everything else. Well, long cloaking ships also get to fire first. You had to be careful against those. But because you have hacking, it's pretty easy to transition into like a weapons systems going forward, or like I said, teleporter as a maybe kind of get thing. All right, we're done with all the A ships. Next up, the Kestrel B. So the Kestrel B has a really powerful weapon setup. It has 4 basic lasers and weapons level 4. This ship often has a tendency to just, shoot the enemy weapons before they even have a chance to fire, and then pick them apart very quickly. It also has a pretty solid layout because it's kind of like a donut and good venting. I haven't talked really about venting that much. I guess I'll only mention it when it's a problem. And it starts with 4 crew, so generally fixing things isn't too big of an issue. As far as weaknesses on this ship, I'm going to talk about the upgrading of the weapons now. Normally we talk about upgrades later. So there seems to be I'm going to say a misconception that upgrading the weapons on this ship is really, really weird. It's kind of not. if you think of it as 3 basic lasers and then just another basic laser, well, Crow, that's just 4 basic lasers. But if you think of it separately, you're just dropping that laser for anything that would help augment your offense. And because you already are at weapons 4, plus you're getting the 10 scrap back for selling it, scrap-wise, it's on par with basically all the ships. You're looking at like a 5 scrap difference. Now, once you get to another weapon online, then it does get a little bit weird. Because then you're not like bringing an old weapon back online, you're just bringing a whole new weapon online while losing another one. Like, that's when it actually feels noticeable, I would argue. And so I think what people kind of tend to do with this ship is they ignore viable weapons early because they're just kind of flying. And then they're like, well, I just want the best weapons in the game because my weapons are already amazing. But if you find like a heavy laser 1, a burst 2, charge 1, charge 2, like a weapon that you would normally pick up with any of the other ships, and just use that weapon in that 4th slot, if you need, like, you're gonna be like, oh, this just operates like another ship, and it's totally fine. It'll feel weird because you went from, you know, blasting enemy weapons before they got to fire to being slower, but I think the ship will have a better feel to it when you know, start playing it that way. It doesn't really generate a lot of other money. You know, you don't have any augments to sell. You got to buy all your systems, so you're gonna feel that. So you gotta pay the piper. But again, you do have weapons 4, so that's like, I think that's 35 scrap of value. Plus, every time you sell a basic laser, you get 10 back. The first upgrade you get on the ship is going to be the shields. Get safe. You might get the opportunity to crew kill. With the basic lasers, you can be pretty controlling. This is very niche against like Mantis trying to repair oxygen. It can happen. But then once after you get your shield upgraded, you do, as I said, you want to find a weapon. Or hacking. Hacking is like a kind of okay alternative. I think a lot of people just kind of try to focus on hacking and then they fall behind weapon-wise because they didn't bother to upgrade it. Yeah. This goes into the A tier. It's very, very strong in the early game. As I said, you're going to blast most enemy ships, even Zoltan shields. It's very difficult for them to, like, you're going to fire 4 shots. Even if you take 2 damage to your shield system, you still get to fire another 2 shots. Like, it's very resilient to taking damage in the weapons. But you are going to have to buy everything, and you're going to have to, like, deal with the mental hurdles of the upgrading of weapons. The Engi B. What's good about the Engi B? It has a lot of stuff you can sell on it. You got 2 weapons, you got 3 drones, you got an augment, all of that stuff you can sell. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can sell on it. I guess we could talk about the fact it does have a heavy laser 1, which is great because, you know, for 1 power it deals 2 damage. It has a very high chance of causing a fire or a breach. It's like, you know, 30%. Above 30% for them or something like that. Like it goes down because once you get a fire, you're less likely to get breached. It also can like stun at 20% chance. I don't know. Numbers. Very, very likely to have a secondary effect. And that's really good. And I guess you have the Engi and 2 repair bots so they can fix things. Does that help with death spirals? Not so much. Why is that? Because the weapons are garbage. We talk about weapon ships and that you know, the really strong ones can kind of deal with like 2 shielded ships, deal decent damage through 2 shielded ships. Most of the ones up here have those capabilities that are above it. This one, you need to land 2 shots to deal any damage. Like you have to have the ion and then you have to hit the heavy laser. Now it's true that if the ion hits, you have 2 chances for the heavy laser to hit. But because the heavy ion takes 13 seconds, it's possible you just get hit in the weapons before they even had a chance to fire. And it's like, oh, well, this is really bad. I'll take 1 damage, I'll still fire the ion, and then hopefully the heavy charges and I get to fire it and it lands. Because if it doesn't, you just start taking a ton of damage. And against 2 shielded ships, you can technically get through, but you have to hit 5 consecutive shots with some pretty specific timing in order to get through. There's videos about it. It's too long to go into. So yeah, the weapons are very, very bad. And the reason I'm kind of hesitant about heavy laser is heavy laser with a 3-weapon setup is, like, it's okay, right? Again, if you have, you know, combination of flak 1s, burst 2s, you have, you know, 6 projectiles or 5 projectiles setting it up. Okay, like that kind of works. But if you had like 2 burst laser 2s in a heavy laser, you're like, or I'm sorry, 2 burst laser 1s in a heavy one, you're thinking, oh, I got 4 shots in a heavy. That's not enough. Like, it's not. I think most 3-weapon setups is you're really looking for just a couple shots and then like a halberd beam ideally. And then kind of reliant on like hacking to get through. I'm not trying to besmirch Heavy Laser 1. Heavy Laser 1 is a fantastic weapon. It truly is. Again, it's very disruptive. But in all honesty, with this ship, you're going to just kind of sell off everything. Yeah. As well as the fact that you only have 1 crew, which makes dealing with borders very spooky. It makes dealing with mind control very annoying. It makes dealing with ROG Live Mind events 20% chance to end your run. Whee! So that's really rough. And then really just like kind of like nothing works with it, you know? It's like, oh, what about mind control? You don't even have sensors. Mind control really isn't an option. Oh, okay, true. What about cloaking? Well, you're not crewed and you only start with level 1 engines. So you're going to still have to buy like a whole bunch of stuff to really get cloaking to work. I mean, again, you still probably want it, but it's just like I said, everything has this like additional cost to it that you just normally take for granted with every other ship out there. So we upgrade shields as soon as possible. And then there we are trying very, very much to get a weapon online. You can very comfortably sell the drones and at least 1 repair bot. Possibly even the charge ion. Possibly the anti-boarding bot if, you know, like if there's like a flak 1 in store, your chances of survival are so much better with the flak 1 and the heavy with no anti-personnel than, you know, just like the starting weapons and with the anti-personnel. Like, you know, just take some damage, try to protect medbay. It's daunting, but again, the weapon situation is just really, really unbelievably bad when the ship starts out with. Most weapons will help out though. Like even if you find another ion weapon, just geez, a blast or a stun, or just the fact that your weapon loadout is faster. Another really strong option is actually a combat 1. You just remove the repair drone, but the combat 1 kind of works with everything. If the ion stunner, or if the heavy ion hits, then for 10 seconds your little combat drone is shooting them to pieces. You can also just use the combat drone to try and pop their shields and slide in a heavy laser before their weapons have a chance to fire. So that's really nice. Hacking again is also another option, just like some way to improve your offense, because it's really, really bad. And then you're still, you know, trying to kind of figure out your crew situation. So it shouldn't be surprising. This ship ends up in the D tier. It has a lot of scrap, but it has multiple flaws, really awful weapons, the 1 crew. Yeah, so it can just struggle for a very long period of time. Next, the Fed B. So the Fed B has dual lasers, 1 power, 2 shots, exceptionally good weapon, and a Leto, which fires at 7 seconds, so it has the ability to disrupt enemy weapons. You just don't really start with that many missiles. I really, really wish the ship started with 5 more missiles. I think it would actually go up like 1 rank if it started with just more missiles. Anyways, so you have dual lasers and the Leto, which also lets you hit 2 systems, so enemy ships can't run away, or less likely to be able to run away. You also have an artillery, which is at level 2, which actually makes it a little bit more useful. Really, at level 3 is where it can stop ships from running away. Well, and it can hit ships before they're able to run away. And you actually have a lot of power. This ship has an abundance of power, plus it has a Zoltan, so that's kind of really nice. And again, just marketing artillery system is not great. It's terrible compared to other systems. But you have this concept, right, where you could just Leto them in the weapons to try and kind of be safe, and then Turtle build around the artillery. And the dual laser pairs with a lot of different weapons, and you have 4 weapon slots, so you can kind of, build out to your traditional weapon ship. As far as weaknesses go, you do only have the 2 power and weapons, so if you get hit in the weapons, your offense is noticeably worse. You're kind of set with this idea of like, all right, so if you took 1 damage to your weapon, your Leto, which you don't have a lot of Leto missiles, or you don't have a lot of missiles to fire your Leto, so you can't really rely on that to kind of deal with enemy ships, but then you have to land both of your shots with your dual lasers to be any good. So that is a noticeable problem, though they are quick weapons, so they do get to fire at least 1 volley first. But like, Zoltan shields, that's going to take a lot of work to get through. The ship layout is not good. The weapons and shields are vented through the medbay, through quad airlocks in the center of the ship. Normally you don't want to kind of vent this way. You just generally don't want to be venting through your medbay if you can help it. So sometimes fires can particularly double fires can spread and do nasty damage to arguably the 2 most important systems in the early going, your shields and your weapons. As far as the other side of the ship, borders in that portion, the left side, I guess we'll say, tend to get funneled into piloting, which is the place you don't want borders. You just don't want them in your piloting. Yeah, so it's gross. You don't have really anything sellable outside of the Leto. You don't have like real crew killing capabilities. You don't have any of the systems outside of artillery, so you're gonna have to buy them. No real generating of extra scrap here. So the first thing we want to upgrade is shields. Try and get safe as possible by getting that second shield bubble online. And then what we're looking for is a weapon or hacking. Again, we generally want to get a weapon before we get hacking, just to buoy our offense. And, I forgot to say this about the Fed A. Well, I'll say it now. This ship, the Fed A, and I guess maybe probably like the Slug C, these ships, normally I'll be like, all right, like you get your upgrade and then you're going to look to buy stuff and then you're not really doing any ship improvements until Sector 3, when you kind of want to get like to 2 shields. I do recommend getting another weapon online immediately. Yeah, for those ship layouts. Like I said, their weapons are kind of soft. It's very easy for your weapon system to get disrupted. So building into it to make sure that your weapons are efficient in the now makes a lot of sense to me. But it gets in just above its cousin, its brother, its sister. While this has the 4 crew, so people think like, it's better. The fact is that your ability to do 2 damage, the Leto is just like, it's just a better flex point. The fact that you can take 1 damage in your weapons and you still have an option, even though it's very limited. And that you can hit like 2 systems to try and stop enemy ships from running away. Like that will matter. Boy, will that matter. Next, the Zoltan B. So the Zoltan B is kind of cool in that it's a 4-power weapon system. There's only 3 ships with that. One of them's coming up, and we already talked about the Kestrel B. So you have 2 ion blast and a pike beam. And generally what you want to do is like fire both ion blasts at the weapons. One hits the shield bubble, one hits their weapons, slows their weapons down, which keeps your Zoltan shield up. And it times perfectly that the pike beam will still hit. Like through the shield being ioned, waiting the 5 seconds, and then what it takes for their shield bubble to recharge, you can just kind of sneak in. So your shots hitting, you get through enemy ships pretty quickly. And then you can use like ion beams to keep disrupting their weapons. Ion blasts to keep disabling their weapons and killing them with the pike. Very cool. Actually, I should have talked about the Zoltan shield, of course, the augment, which we've talked about before. The Zoltan shield augment preventing hacking, mind control, non-event borders, prevents you from taking 5 damage. It's particularly important on this ship because you have a broken shield system. Again, there are situations where you will also want to sell it off for 40 scrap. Doesn't often happen, but it can happen. So you get sort of like the last piece of your winning combo. As I said, it tends to just be either cloaking or hacking to get you there. And it actually, the ship layout, it's kind of a mixed bag. On part of the ship, the rooms are very, very close, so you're able to get to where you need to do try and repairs very quickly. But you, on the back half of the ship, you do have to vent through doors, and that can be dangerous because, like, you know, your doors get hit, and then you can't really fix things because one of the problems, it's not the key problem, but one of the problems is you have Zoltan crew with 70 HP. And that means like they're not great at fighting fires or operating in oxygenless environments. So that's something you have to be mindful of. But the biggest problem with the ship, as I said, is its broken shields. It is 100 scrap to complete a shield bubble. Most fights, you won't notice it, right? Because like I said, you have the Zoltan shield bubble up. You're going to ion their weapons, slow their offense down, hit them with the pike beam, ion them in the weapons again, their offense is completely offline, and everything's fine. That's going to happen much of the time. When that does not happen, something like that, when that doesn't occur, and your Zoltan shield goes down, you start taking absurd amount of damage. Hazard events are particularly dangerous. As long as you have like one pip in the Zoltan shield up, it will absorb the solar flare, so it operates like a shield bubble. That's important to know. So you only get like the 1 to 2 fires and 1 hull damage versus like I think it's like upwards of 6 fires and 2 damage. But if they have an offensive drone and they get through that Zoltan shield very quickly, and maybe your ions don't hit, you can take pretty catastrophic damage very quickly. And 100 scrap is a lot of scrap. When we talk about vulnerable ships, it's like, oh, like, you know, there's some really bad scenarios, but you get this buffer point. It stops a lot of death spirals. You get this, you know, your weapons are upgraded, 25 scrap, 35 scrap is what we're talking about. 100 scrap is a lot of scrap. You're generally looking at, with items, 140, 150, 160 scrap in Sector 1. So you're talking most of the scrap in Sector 1 is going into this. So you are going to be in a multitude of fights. And if you're taking chip damage, or like I said, they get through your Zoltan shield, a lot of bad things can happen. We already talked about the weak crew. And yeah, the first thing you upgrade is the shield. You got to get that shield online. And then you kind of have like this scaling thing where, like, you want to have 2 shields by Sector 3 because they get like double offensive drones in that sector, and they get like level 5 weapons. And so you really want to have just like 2 shields again. Hazard events against multiple offensive drones is really disgusting. You do not want to deal with it. So you're in this bind because it's like, all right, I want 100 scrap for the shields, and then I need to spend another 50 scrap on that second shield bubble before Sector 3. So that's like 150 scrap I kind of have locked in. What am I going to pick up in between, right? Like, what am I going to try and do to kind of like help my ship out? I still think you're kind of looking for a weapon. Some ion weapons are interesting. Normally you don't like pick up ion weapons, you go for straight damage, but like ion weapons are really tempting with this ship because you already start with 2 of them and you also already have a beam. If you can find a projectile weapon, it's also really nice just as like an alternative setup, and it's not uncommon to be like an ion blast, charge 1, burst 1, and the pike beam, and then maybe picking up hacking, or just picking up hacking early on. Now, would I pick up hacking in lieu of getting the shield online? I don't think so. I think that you still really want to get the shield online, but again, it's a situation where I couldn't tell you the numbers of like, here's all the scenarios where it would save your life, and here's all the ones where it fails. And if we calculate it out to infinity, this is 0.4% better. I don't know. I feel like the answer is no. Because like one of the awful ships could be like Zoltan Shields, because like they, you know, you get a little bit of a war of attrition. But again, you have ions, so hopefully you get through first. This ship ends up, I kind of put it at the bottom of C tier. I feel like it's vulnerable early and for a very long time until you get 100 scrap. Fights are either completely safe or very, very terrifying. There's not really like a middle ground. And so yeah, it gets to end up there. It's Stealth B time. So what does the Stealth B have going for it? The infamous Stealth B. It does have cloaking, right? So you get this plus 60% dodge. It's level 2 cloaking, lasts for 10 seconds. That's pretty nice. It's a very powerful system on its own. You have a glaive beam, which again, strength, weakness. It can just one-shot a lot of enemy ships. That's really nice. And you can make certain arguments that like you pick it up and well, you start with it, but if you get like a flak 1 to go with it, you're kind of set on your offense. Like that can actually legit just work, so it doesn't need like a lot of support. And you already start at weapons 4. And you do have long-range scanners to try to avoid hazards, and boy, do you really want to avoid hazards. Because your weaknesses are you do not have a shield system. You don't even have a broken shield system. You just don't have a shield system. Though if the store is selling systems, it has to sell a shield system. And your weapon takes 25 seconds to fire. So if you're doing the math at home, you realize that you are vulnerable, right? Like, yeah, you have cloaking, but that's only a percentage. Enemy stuff can still hit through cloaking. That's really bad. And if you get hit in the weapons, the spiral just like the spiral is implicit. Like it's just, unless it's like an ion weapon in a Leto or something along those lines, like you are in for an absolute drumming. So that's the main known issue for this very much a glass cannon, is that you have a very slow weapon, and a lot of times enemies are going to be able to fire their weapons. Well, all of them will be able to fire their weapons first, and that if you get hit in the weapons, it is a long time before it gets activated. And high level play on hard mode, we alleviate this by using a myriad of strategies. Some people vent their ships down to 50% oxygen or a little bit less just to get the O2 on smart targeting. I use a sensor strategy. I put a crew in sensors roughly before the enemy weapons fire. That way I can turn off my weapon system. And you can't have a Zoltan in there because that's considered powered, but I turn off the weapon system right before they get a solution and they're about to fire their weapons. And what that does is that removes your weapons off of smart targeting. So, you know, it reduces it something to like below 7% chance. And then you have cloaking, so you have your best option. Then there's other things. There's other timing mechanisms you can do for very similar things. Zoltan Treadmill is the other one, where moving the Zoltan crew to a specific portion of the ship and then returning them back, you use that as the timer of when to toggle off weapons. You also have really terrible venting. I think, off the top of my head, you think you only have 3 places to vent. The med bay you cannot kite through. You are also underpowered. it's really bad. You're generally not going to get extra scrap, though you could say, well, you know, cloaking and you get to dive. You are far behind the 8-ball very early on. So you have a lot to get there before you can start diving around. As far as upgrades with this ship, the first thing you want to do is upgrade to cloaking level 3. That's 50 scrap. Once you get to that level, then you can essentially pre-cloak. You start the fight by cloaking. So you get 15 seconds with the man crew bonus, and then you're able to hit them with the glaive. Though I think certain ion weapons still get to fire. Maybe heavy laser ones can still fire depending on the timing. You are still vulnerable to enemy ships if they have cloaking, if they have hacking and target your weapons, or if they have drones. Again, like the Stealth A, you kind of need to get into a position of, like, if a shot is incoming and not hitting a vital system, then you don't cloak it. Once you get cloaking 3, what you're trying to do is hopefully survive and get to a store and try to buy hacking. Hacking is the first purchase that you want to have because it's only 80 scrap and incredibly efficient in terms of upping your offense. And essentially, we just want to do the pre-cloak, hack their shields, one-shot enemy ships. That's the general plan. Or just, you know, severely disable their weapon system. And hacking is, like I said, it's $80. 35 to upgrade it to the next level. That's pretty cheap. The other option is to buy shields. Again, if they're selling systems, they will be selling shields. It does give you a bunch of security. Hazards aren't as scary. Drones aren't as scary. Your glaive beam is still able to do damage through 2 shielded ships. You know, and you're still going. As far as trying to upgrade, like, weapon system, it's like $50 to get a 1-power weapon online, which is still in the realm of possibilities. If you get, like, a heavy laser, an ion blast, a stunner, you're not breaking the bank. You're still under 100 scrap. But if you're trying to get a 2-power weapon online, it is so ridiculously scrap heavy. That, like, next power bar being, like, 75 scrap, you're just sinking often way too much money for that to be viable. Stealth B gets to sit in its own category here in the F tier. Now, I know Burrito, I believe, is on like a 30 win streak with just the Stealth B. Again, it kind of shows where we as a community have come in understanding strategies on even these awful ships. Though Burrito also executes at an exceptionally high level of play. I think I have like a 14 win streak on this ship. But yeah, it's vulnerable to a bunch of enemy ships that are all very terrifying. And even when you get the key upgrade, there's still a lot of very terrifying fights. So yeah, it gets to be in the F tier. Rock B. So Rock B starts with a heavy pierce and a firebomb. Heavy pierce is interesting. It's like a heavy laser, except it ignores 1 shield, but it costs 2 power to operate. You do have 3 power in weapons, so you actually have a buffer point for it, which is really nice. It definitely helps increase survivability, like a lot of other ships where you just get hit in weapons and then you just can't do anything. But yeah, so the heavy pierce being able to do 2 damage through a shield bulb being up is definitely strong in the early game. You have crew killing potential. You do have the firebomb, but also just the secondary effects from the heavy the heavy pierce. Crew kills are not uncommon with this ship. You also have rock plating, which you can sell. Firebomb is something else you can also potentially sell. So you can have money very quickly. So you can hit early stores. The weaknesses on this ship, though, are still kind of the weapon systems. You really can't deal damage through a 2-shielded ship. Your best bet with just the starting weapons is that you firebomb their shields and that they're able to be burned down enough that then you can fire the heavy through. That's really not a great option. Against auto ships, it's a very terrible option. This ship is also kind of vulnerable against Zoltan shields with your, singular projectile. So you're looking at 4 shots, about 40 seconds before you do really anything to them. That doesn't feel particularly great. And even though the ship's layout is pretty compact, it can still take time for crew to get anywhere. You don't have a door system. Like, it's just not on the ship. I think the most annoying thing about not having a door system is that it's going to take up a slot in the store. It's not guaranteed. It's not like if you don't have shields or a medical unit, you have to get the door system. That would be so much worse. But still, it takes up a slot, and it's like 60 scrap. So it's not like, oh, I'll just thin out the pool because I'm going to buy it for like 20 scrap or whatever. It's, ugh. So you have this like real scaling problem, kind of slow, and then no door system. So like boarders, particularly Mantis, in high numbers, you can't like vent them out, which is the best strategy for getting things off your ship. It's like, it turns like everything into Lanius. Like you just can't vent them. It's awful. Now, in terms of upgrading the ship, guess what? We're going to go and get a shield bubble. Try to stop death spirals from happening because we have a buffer point and then a full shield bubble, and that's going to make it also more comfortable to get crew kills. You have to be a little bit selective in crew kills, or I guess you just have to be mindful of like, okay, like how many fire bombs is it going to take to try and save as many bombs as possible. But then you're really looking for a weapon. This is also kind of where the scaling gets wonky because it's a 2-power one-shot. We talked about that with like the heavy laser and the 3-power setup, or the 3-weapon slot setup. Because it's like 2 powers, you're like, all right, let's say I get a charge 1 and a burst 1, and like a heavy laser. I'm feeling pretty good about that at 5 power, but that it doesn't fly here. You need 6. You need to spend another 75 scrap, and yeah, you're piercing through a shield, but like that's a bigger financial burden. Though you, again, as I said, you already have a buffer point in weapons. Just you have to be mindful that the weapon system kind of like scales higher quickly because you have this kind of like one-shot 2-power weapon. Though you have a lot of stuff you can sell out. So hacking is okay. Again, like if you're like, all right, well, I'm going to use hacking to support my starting weapons. You're hacking shields to fire 1 shot. It's not the best, but maybe you don't have any other options. Again, maybe you find something else. I don't know how I feel about teleporter with Rock B. The idea is that you can send your 2 rocks over, land a firebomb, and your crew are immune to fire. They are not immune to the explosion. It will deal them 30 points of damage. But then, like, waiting for the fire to slowly burn down their weapons, and then hopefully not take the oxygen out of it, so your crew are asphyxiating while they're punching down weapons and maybe dealing with the enemy crew. Yeah, it's just not, it's not great. It's not something I would be like, oh man, I got teleporter, everything's fantastic. I'm going to put this in C tier and kind of just after the Fed ships. The Fed ships weapons are just like a little bit better in working with other weapons against a pierce, so you can't really deal with like, can't get like, it doesn't pair well with like a beam weapon. Though it does have like more sellables. I feel like it's a little bit more trusted than maybe like the Engi ship. So yeah, we'll just pop it over there in C tier for just like the weird upgrading, and the no doors is like, it's just like a perfect level of annoying. Like, next, Slug B. So the Slug B starts with a teleporter and an Artemis. Much like we start with a teleporter and small bomb on the Mantis A, that's a really, really strong combination. So you can send your crew over, try to distract the enemy, knowing boarding strategies, which is very important on this ship, as your boarders are slugs. And you are able to get crew kills, which generates more money. And like I said, Artemis is the best missile weapon in the game. It can deal damage through 5 shielded ships. You do have 1 buffer point. You have weapons level 2. So it's generally going to be live That helps to keep you alive. There is also a bunch of sellables, I guess, because you do have a heal burst, which is sellable eventually, maybe, as well as slug repair gel, which is 30 scrap. So that's what kind of ship has going for it. Is like I said, is you know, hey, boarding and missile weapons and crew kills do good work. Now the weaknesses on the ship. I'm going to start with the fact that it's micro heavy, but that it just ties into the fact that it doesn't have a medical unit. As I said, it has a healing burst. It does not have a clone bay. It does not have a medical unit. And since your slugs are not going to win most fights, like they're not going to beat Mantis. It's not very. Lanius are kind of spooky, very very spooky. You're not going to beat Mantis. You're not really going to overpower. It's a coin toss against humans. Rocks, you can manipulate their slow movement to some degree to get an advantage, but at 150 health, you really have to be on point on your micro. This is probably the most micro intensive ship in terms of boarding. Well, like the actual boarding tactics. The ship is also kind of light on power because you don't have the med bay. Now, the med bay will be sold in a store. Like, it has to be if they sell systems. Just as an FYI. But you are a little bit light on power because it's missing the one power that you normally are missing on ships, but you don't have a medical unit. So you're like, you don't have this like floating power that you have for oxygen that you would put in other systems. There just isn't the power there. So you're actually light on power as well, which doesn't feel very comfortable. As far as upgrades, get shields. I used to kind of rush stores and you could sell the gel and the healing burst and get a medical unit. I don't care which medical unit. It just saves on missiles and it lets me be way more aggressive with missiles. As well as just I have an option. If I get Clone Bay, that would be great. But not, like I said, I'm not going to hold out for it. But instead, like I said, we're not even doing that. We're not even talking about that because you want to upgrade shields. Get yourselves 2 shields. Be as secure as possible. Take as less damage as possible. We talk about death spirals, but also just like preventing yourself from taking a lot of chip damage. You know, like from just like at the extra shots from burst laser 2s or flak 1s or whatever. And just kind of like the dividends of like, oh man, I'm like at this store and yeah, okay, so you spent 50 scrap to get the shield bubble, but you saved, I don't know, 10, 12 scrap from getting there, plus like the death spirals. I mean, that also like helps. That can help a significant amount. Like I said, you want to get shields up, try to get as safe as possible. And then you are kind of looking for a weapon. Better alternative Zoltan shields because you're weak against Zoltan shields. And then those are fights maybe early on you just kind of avoid if possible because you're just relying on your Artemis missile. 4 Artemis missile shots are going to take a while, assuming that they all hit. And maybe just as like an alternative to just being super reliant on those missiles. Or like just picking up a med bay. You can another reason that you also do want to pick up a medical unit is, as I said, it is going to get offered in stores if they sell a system, to the point that, if you go a ways into the game and you still don't have a medical system, the stores are going to start getting screwed up and they're going to only start offering you like 2 systems. Like the item pool just kind of gets messed up. It gets kind of broken. So you're like, oh, well, I'm going to not have this so I can get this cool 4 specialty system set up. Like it may, I don't know what the numbers of the impact are going to be, but it can potentially actually screw up late game trying to get those key systems that you want. But hacking is a really, really strong support option. Again, it doesn't really help you against Zoltan shields directly, but it helps your borders. You're gonna have to be really particular with your missiles. So Slug B, I actually have in B tier. Because generally you're going to be safe in the early sector. You really are, because you have the Artemis. You can generate, and you have money, so you can go to stores, because you always have like that 30 scrap in your pocket. And you're going to get crew kills to generate stuff, but it is micro heavy. It is like power light, so you got to be on your toes for a very long period of time. But, you know, missile weapon plus teleporter does generally very good things. Speaking of teleporters, we got the Mantis B. So the strong thing about the Mantis B is we're introduced to a 4-person teleporter. 4-person teleporters are ridiculously strong, particularly in the early on, because you can just overwhelm the enemies and kill them very quickly. Also being able to board 4 crew. You can do some fun micro things, distract them in one room while having crew in another room, punching down systems. It is a powerful, powerful tool. We also have drone control, which has a DD1 attached to it and a boarding bot. Now, one thing I see people with the boarding bot is they have way too much faith in the boarding bot. Do not take blind fights against auto ships. Don't do it. Don't just assume that it's not going to be a gross fight and my boarding bot is going to land in weapons and it's going to be okay. I've seen so many runs end where I'm like, oh, that's like a disgusting auto ship. And people are like, well, just end the boarding bot because it's fine. And then they just get ripped apart. And it's like, I don't know why you took that fight. I wanted the 8 scrap. So that defense drone, when using the defense drone, be mindful of, blind spots. The front of the ship, defense drones can't see. So like missiles from the front of the ship hitting the front of the ship get through. That's going to be in the weakness section. So actually you can toggle it off, like keep it turned off until just when the missile fires and then turn it on. So itself is not on the smart targeting. But you have these 2 Mantis boarders and the 4-person teleporter. You generate money. Boy, do you generate money. I should have talked about 2 shields first, but we'll talk about money now. Because you get crew kills, plus you have sellables, you have the boarding bot, you have the Mantis pheromones. Those you can also sell. To go along with the defense drone, you do have 2 shields. So the ship is normally very safe against like a lot of weapon systems because you already get 2 shields. Think of all the ships we talk about where you want to get 2 shields immediately. Not with this one. Now, as far as weaknesses go, though, fixing things is a real problem. We have 2 Mantis crew. So combined, they fix at the same rate as a human. By themselves, it's 25 seconds to repair a single bar. So the big problem with this ship, is noted, is if a fire breaks out in your oxygen and or doors, they tend to spread one into the other. This can create death. You need very, very specific micro and certain minimum levels of oxygen to be able to repair that system in that scenario. Now, we do know that there is a venting technique. So I'll talk about that now. There's a venting technique where you go ahead and drain oxygen from those rooms, from oxygen indoors. So if a fire starts, it can put it out the best possible. Okay? Once a room is out of oxygen, you can do nothing more to put out the fire. Putting 2 fully trained Engis into the room without oxygen doesn't change anything. So you vent those 2 rooms going into a fight, and then you have to just be carefully monitoring the oxygen levels in those rooms. Because it does vent through your teleporter, and you don't want your crew to take hell. So generally, it's like I vent it out, and then I close off relevant doors. I vent it out completely, then I open up interior doors and let the O2 kind of settle in while the oxygen is turned off. And then I put my crew, you know, in positions and jump to the next beacon. Positions, of course, being piloting and sensors, because I want to know what I'm boarding into. Yeah. So that particular defensive against the fires is incredibly helpful, and it's why I don't think this ship is as bad as it had been. It used to be like considered a top tier ship, and then it went all the way to the bottom because of the fire problem, but now the fire problem is significantly less of a problem. But we also have the problem, which is the defense drone can't protect the shield system or itself from incoming missiles, as long as they're coming from the front side of the ship. So there is some smart targeting you can do, like if you don't have an incoming projectile, you can turn off shields. You can turn off the drones, and hopefully it tries to target something else. Then you turn the systems on and be okay. Some smart targeting manipulation can be very, very helpful. As far as upgrades on this ship, engines. Want to get upgrade to engines level 3. This helps you to be able to run from fights. Particularly, like level 2 actually offers a very significant improvement in charging your FTL fast enough to get out of like really gross fights. At level 3 with full training, you can even outrun ships that are running away at the start of fights, which is a terrifying thing that happened to me once, where I was like, oh, like I had crew, I didn't have to worry about the engines thing, because and then I ran into a ship that like ran away at the start and doubled the fleet pursuit, and it ended in a dive. But anyways, upgrading your engines by 2 levels makes it significantly safer for you to just get out of bad fights quickly. Outside of that upgrade, what are we looking for at stores? Crew is incredibly helpful. Again, just helps with the repairs, helps with boarders. Pick up an Engi. Some people are like, well, you know, I want to help with boarding. You got 2 Mantis. You got 2 Mantis. The Engi's going to be fine. All right? It's going to be tickling them, but you got 100 HP. That's the real big thing. It still slightly helps speed up the fight. Again, you can still sell the boarding bot, assuming you haven't sold it. But do sell the boarding bot and the pheromones to buy crew. But I can't kill auto ships. Some of those fights were really bad anyways. You didn't want them. And this ship does not need a significant amount of scrap to get going. I guess that's a strength as well. It's like much like the Stealth A, and in the next ship we'll talk about, Kestrel B, it doesn't need a lot of ship because a lot of ship stuff. What? A lot of stuff for the ship, because you already start with 2 systems. You have the teleporter, you have the defense drone, or the drone system. Generally, you're still going to want hacking, because hacking is going to be really beneficial to your boarding support. And, you know, you're going to use the defense drone as your anti-missiles. Right, so go ahead, upgrade engines, and then just try to find crew. And then after that, you know, like maybe find something for Zoltan shields. I didn't talk about the fact that weapons are at level 1, so it's 40 scrap to upgrade them. That's another weakness, another 3 weapon slotted ship. I think all the Mantis ships are that way. So you can't really reliably get like a good weapon system on it. Again, it doesn't tend to be too much of an issue because you're going to board with 2+ Mantis and some other stuff and kill enemy ships generally very quickly. Yeah, so like I said, get crew. Then once you get crew, you're kind of in this, you know, just looking for things at stores. You could even get more crew to kill enemy ships faster. You could find something to help you get through Zoltan shields. That could be like a beam drone. That's an option. Also, if you don't find crew early, there's some considerations for things like long-range scanners to avoid hazards, because solar flares are really terrifying. Asteroid fields can also be really bad. You know, something to help also with like Zoltan shields and auto ships. Boarding ships can't deal with Zoltan shields and auto ships very well. So I'm actually going to stick it into the B tier. I I think its scaling is very high. I think its vulnerability with proper venting is lower than it used to be. So unlike these ships, which has these kind of like weird scaling issues with also some vulnerabilities in the early sector, it's like this is slightly more vulnerable. That's debatable. I don't have the exact numbers. But it's just like its upswing is ridiculous. It's very easy to snowball into victories within like 2-3 sectors. So it gets to be in B tier. Speaking, as I said, 4-person teleporters, the Kestrel B. So it starts with a 4-person teleporter and 3 Kestrel crew. So the Kestrel crew have a lockdown ability, which is pretty significant. It's essentially makes them into walking hacks. And you can be really abusive of it because if you walk a crew out of a room, as soon as the doors open, you can hit that lockdown and it locks down the room behind them. So your crew can leave a room while everybody else is locked into a little crystal tomb for a little bit, allowing your crew to be separated out and like punch down a vital system. So yeah, like there's no better boarders than crystals. They take half damage from asphyxiation, so they can actually go into auto ships and do like 6 damage before teleporting back. It's pretty silly. Maybe it's 5, so you should definitely know that. It also starts with cloaking. So cloaking, again, incredibly strong. You already have 2 systems, avoiding a lot of incoming damage. Potentially you can kind of farm more money. You're also going to get more money because you do crew kills, which have better rewards. You have this really, really terrible augment called Kestrel Vengeance. We're not going to talk about it other than that you can sell it. If you know, you know. Anyways, it sells for 40 scrap, which is a pretty significant amount of money. Go to a store, sell it. And we'll get to 2 shields, but that's skipping ahead. So you have cloaking, you have this 4 crew teleporter with crystals that send over, and the scaling on this ship is ridiculous. This is the ship that I ran golf scores with, which was trying to beat hard mode with the lowest score possible. I stopped when I got down to a 2202. I think there's been some like 1600, 1700 scores that have also won with this ship. You need like 700 scrap. 700 scrap is all this ship needs in victory. You think like, man, I had a 1500 scrap run. That was a really low scrap run. This ship's like, yeah, give me half of that and we're good. Just give me a way through Zoltan shields and we're good. So as far as weaknesses go, this ship doesn't have any real solutions against Zoltan shields, and its solution against auto ships isn't great. So yeah, Zoltan shields you just can't interact with. Auto ships you can board and try and punch them down. I say it's great, not great, because if they have cloaking, something can be kind of disgusting. If they have a missile, things can be gross. I almost recently lost a run when I ended up in a first jump auto ship with hacking Artemis heavy laser in an asteroid field, and the hack targeted my shield system, which Mike Hopley subsequently made a video about how to manipulate cloak timings to try and be as safe as possible. Remember, even if you do cloak, you can still get hit through the cloak. Your weapon system, even though you do have 4 weapon slots, it's level 1, so you're going to have to spend 40 scrap to upgrade weapons. So that's just another weakness. You also have a small problem with fires. Your crew have a penalty when they're putting out fires, and the ship only has like 4 vents. I actually prevent cloaking because if the 4 people like from a boarding event go into cloaking, they'll break that system before you can vent them out. So that can be like a little bit sketchy. You have to be also just kind of also cognizant about boarding into pirate ships with clone bays. A lot of how the ship kind of works is you kind of win this attrition or by like separating out their crew from their vital systems. But like teleporting in and their crew start cloning from the medical units, if you're not able to get through their weapons in time, that can be a problem. But again, the being able to lock down rooms as you leave them will definitely help alleviate that. And also having just a crystal crew in sensors so you can just know what situation you're getting into. As far as upgrades, the first thing we want to do is we want to upgrade our shields, get to a second shield bubble, be a whole lot safer. And then getting another crew is really nice. It can kind of help with boarding situations, can kind of help with some of those repair issues. Finding a weapon that also deals with Zoltan shields is, you know, also strong. There's not a problem with it. You know, you don't know in advance. It's like, well, am I going to go, I'm in sector 1. Am I going to get into a bunch of Zoltan sectors? Am I going to go into abandoned sectors? Like, these are forced and I don't have a lot of options. So, like, getting some sort of weapon online, and again, with cloaking, yeah, you know, you're like, kind of like safer. Yeah, so that's kind of the pathway is, like I said, you can think about a weapon, a crew, or Zoltan Shield Bypass can be okay. Like, I mean, again, really pushes down your requirements because you can now just get through the Zoltan Shield in Phase 3 with this particular ship. Dramatic pause. I'm going to put this in S tier. I was thinking it was going to be the top of A tier, but, you know, like I said, I have this early survivability and then like this scaling thing, and this ship's scaling is it's phenomenal. As I said, it's 700 scrap. It does have some wonkiness, like what ships you can interact with, but it's okay to just ignore stuff. You can just ignore stuff. I mean, you could get enough scrap in like, it's like all right, well, I just locked down in sector 5 and sector 6, and you're fine. And I think that's worth putting it like into the S rank because of, like I said, strength of scaling. Next. Oh, I didn't write a thing for the Lanius B. All right, well, we'll just have to wing it. Geez, what's good about the Lanius B? It has an advanced flak, which is like a flak 1, except it's more accurate and shoots faster and only takes 1 power to go. It's the best weapon in the game, I would argue. I mean, 3 shots for 1 power at 9 seconds is silly. It's so ridiculously silly. So you have that. You have a teleporter with mind control and 2 Lanius. It's important that you note that the Lanius can very safely board into auto ships. So that's a pretty significant difference. And then you have the trick with, if you're boarding into other ships, you board into shields, draw their crew into shields, mind control the enemy crew, and then you can move your crew wherever you want to. And the enemy will stay fighting off in shields until, you know, the mind control wears off. And against Zoltan shields, you can just flak them down most of the time and be fine. We're not going to talk about it. So you have this boarding ship that has a way to distract the enemy and allow you to do whatever you want. It has a way to deal with auto ships, and you also have a clone base, so you can just punch them down. And you can even deal with Zoltan shielded ships because you can fire 6 projectiles in, you know, 18 seconds, give or take, which is about as good as anything in terms of getting through Zoltan shields. You're going to get a bunch of money because you do crew kills. You also have a clone bay, which has a little bit of blue options there. An Engi, which is blue options, helps fix things. And you have an augment that you can sell for quick scrap early on. So what are the weaknesses on this ship then? 'Cause it sounds pretty amazing. Not a whole lot. You do only have weapons level 1. So you're going to have to spend 40 scrap to upgrade your weapons, but while it might have a little bit of scaling issue initially, it kind of doesn't because you have this 1 power 3 projectile weapon. So it's like, well, okay, so a heavy laser is $90 to get online to like settle up with like 3 projectiles. That's really, really strong, and like cost-wise, it's not too much above what you would need to do with like other ships. And then as you go further along, it kind of like the cost becomes less because you just don't have to fully upgrade it. I mean, there's a lot of times you can just get like advanced flak, flak 1, like 2 heavy lasers, and you're like, oh cool, I have a 5-power weapon system that will just destroy anything. When boarding in new ships, you do have to be a little bit careful because you have to try and maintain your Lanius crew health. They have a clone bay and you can't vent them. So what tends to happen in terms of like things going bad is that your boarders are at low health, and so you board, and for some reason like a crew dies and your clone bay gets hit, and so you just have to kind of be cognizant of that. But it tends not to be a particular problem. One little thing is just like all your systems are generally at like 1 power, so if something goes wrong, like if as soon as the system takes damage, then that system just stops working. Whatever. The first upgrade on this ship is shields, because it's a boarding ship. Once you get to 2 shields, you're generally a lot safer. I mean, we all know, well, most people know that I had a death on this ship because I ran into Zoltan shield, asteroid, mind control, pike beam, and I got tagged in the shields 3 times in a row. And I just needed to be like really tight on micro. I almost died on this ship in Sector 1 once, though, because I hadn't gotten to, I think I just got second shield or maybe buffer point, but I ran into an ion storm in a drone ship. So like the ships that you don't want to fight in the early sector, drone ship, or not a drone ship, a rebel rigger. Those rebel rigger ships in a hazard event like a pulsar, so like the clone bay, I couldn't protect the clone bay from ions. Or just like a nasty Zoltan ship and as like, I mean, we're talking like the worst of the worst case RNGs to get you into trouble with this particular ship. Oh, I guess I skipped the upgrading path. So once you get your second shield bubble, you're looking for hacking to either assist your boarding or just another weapon to kind of pair along your flak 1. You can go either direction. It's very easy to just turn out into a straight up weapon ship and just ignore boarding, or just kind of keep going with it. It's really funny. You like lean pretty heavily on it in the early game for extra money, but because of the power of the flak and generally all the money you get from all the crew kills, you just kind of turn into this like weapon ship and whatever. So this goes S tier. Yeah, I mean, best weapon, 2 systems, usually transitions into powerful weapon ships, a weapon ship, or just kind of sticks with boarding for a while, so it doesn't, like, it scales pretty okay through the sectors. There's not like a glaring weakness. I mean, even some of the more annoying things, like I said, you have options of dealing with them, so you get an S rank. Now we're on to the C layouts, which are available only in Advanced Edition, and all of them have a clone bay. First up, the Kestrel C. It starts with a dual laser. Dual lasers are great. It's 1 power, fires 2 shots. It's very efficient. You want to keep it for the entirety of the run. There's also an ion stunner that comes with it, which isn't a very good weapon. It can make some crew kills possible by, you know, stunning the crew while they're trying to do repair, stunning them in fire. That's really tricky to get the timing right. But it is an option there. Plus, it also has a clone bay. It also has level 2 sensors, which has a decent number of blue options in the game as well. So that's in terms of the extra money. That's about it, though. In terms of what its weaknesses are, its weapons are kind of a weakness. It's another 2-power weapon system with only 1 targeted damaging weapon. So if you get hit in weapons, your offense just kind of stops working. It's pretty significant. If you're missing your damage shot, if you're not hitting like both of your dual laser shots, it's really tough to like stop enemy ships from running or really get damage beyond what they're able to repair. Stunning is not the same as dealing damage. It simply isn't. The This ship has no sellables. It has no systems. You gotta buy everything. You're like, said there are some potential like blue options. I mean, if you go to abandoned sector, Laniuses have like 8 or 10 blue options in abandoned sectors. So, you know, they're really, really high scrap sector potentials for you early on. But this ship just doesn't really have a lot going for it. As I said, you don't have an augment to sell. You have to buy everything. Your first upgrade is shields. Get safe. Absolutely. Get safe. Try to stop yourself from hitting a death spiral because your shields go down and then you just take a bunch of damage. At least you generally get your volley off first because your weapons are like in that 10-second area. Funny how like a couple seconds matter, right? Like 10 seconds is really fast. 12 seconds is like at the cusp of like it's kind of uncomfortable. 13 seconds is like everything else now just hits me. So once you get the shields, you're really looking for a weapon. Boy, are you looking for a weapon, something to pair with a dual laser. Now, a lot does pair with the dual lasers. Don't get me wrong. Flax. Another ion. I mean, even the ion stunner has, you know, a little bit of extra synergy to it. And maybe even hacking. Just, again, like, hacking doesn't feel super amazing. Here, I guess you would just hack weapons, try and slow it down to try and ensure your volley hits, or just, again, open up the possibility of, like, oh, we found other weapons, so now our weapon system works. Because we've been facilitated with getting hacking already. And that is, yeah, that's like it. It's a terribly boring ship. It gets stuck in the C tier. Because it doesn't, again, it's just like these ships here. It really just doesn't have something to sell. It doesn't have really scaling. It doesn't even have an artillery system to lean on, you know, and it has trouble dealing damage to other ships. So like it has this like weakness in the early sector, and then you just have to buy everything for it. So yeah, you get stuck in the C tier. Engi C. Engi C. Where do we begin with the Engi C? It has hacking. Hacking being like kind of the best bonus system in the game. Enables weapon loadouts and all sorts of shenanigans. Hacking enemy weapons, slowing them down. Whatever. Hacking is, as I said, will continue to say, the thing you want on every single run. You have dual lasers and a beam drone as your offense. Dual lasers, if you hadn't heard, are very, very good. They're 1 power, fire 2 shots. They're excellent. Beam drone, while drones themselves are not something we normally laud, the fact is this helps you get through Zoltan shields very quickly, which are the most dangerous ships you tend to face early on, outside of like, you know, like, it's a rebel disruptor in an ion storm that only targets your vital systems and hits their, like, garbage O2 and medbay or something along those lines. You have 2 Engis, you have a clone bay, you have an augment that sells for 40 scrap, so you can hit every single store starting at the the very first jump. It's tough for death spirals to occur because you have 2 Engis that are going to fix things very quickly. You have some blue options because you have hacking, so you can do crew kills. You have Clone Bay, which also has some blue options. Engi crew also have blue options. Just don't have like dive capabilities very early on. What are the weaknesses on this ship? So the weapons are also the weakness because it is only a level 1 weapons system. So you're going to have to spend 40 scrap on that. I guess technically Defense Scrambler covers that cost. But again, this is going to be another ship where, spoiler alert, we get shields first. And so get shields, not upgrade weapons. I did it again. This is a ship where if you do find a weapon, I would get the weapon online. But I should have said that for the Kestrel C. Sorry about that. Kestrel C is another thing where if you do get a weapon, just get it online immediately. So the weakness is like I said, is the weapon. If you don't find any weapons, it's just one of those runs where you don't find any weapons, your crew kills don't get you any weapons, things can get a little rough. Again, that's kind of true for most ships, I guess, like outside of like boarding ships, because boarding ships just have that alternative. But unlike Kestrel B, or sorry, Kestrel A, where you have, the ability to deal 2 damage through 3 shields, you don't have that power here. And that's like it. Yeah. Upgrade shields. Again, gets our 2nd shield bubble online. You get to be very, very safe, which we love being very safe. And makes it easier to justify hacking O2, trying to get O2 kills in the early sector. Also, you start with like a billion drones, like just the silliest amount of drones. Don't scrimp on like fights where enemies maybe run away or just like put out those beam drones. Put them out there. Do stuff. And the first thing you're looking for is a weapon. Get a weapon along to pair with your dual lasers. And then just kind of keep going. It is a 3-weapon setup, so you generally want to find like a beam weapon and another projectile weapon, and then you just have like, even if you get a burst one, just 2 shots paired with 2 shots and then beam weapon with hacking, you're kind of going to be okay. You start with drone control, so you can get like a defense drone pretty early on as well to give you some anti-missile defense, so you don't have to try and like splurge on cloaking as your final system. But you can. It's very easy for this ship to like win by like sector 2. It just can like things can just easily fall in place where it's like, oh, here's a halberd beam and enough money to like 200 scrap in 2 sectors, so you can buy cloaking and like a shield bubble. It's just like good, you get to win. And because of that, yeah, you get to be the top. I'm gonna put you on the tippy top there. I have for a while. I think I still do, because it's just like. It's like, all right, like, hey, yeah, this gets hit in the weapons. It's a little bit slow. There's some weird fights that kind of, it's just like, the game just has to give you nothing. Shots can also miss, but like, really, it's just like, the game just gives you nothing. Anyways. Fed C. I'm gonna disappoint Gamer Host and Farb. So we start with a teleporter, and we also have an augment to sell, but the teleporter does give us crew killing, which, hey, that's more money. That's good stuff. Do be wary that, like, you should please send the Mantis and the human. I don't even know, nobody does. Do we even talk about sending Zoltans anymore? Like, that was the meme, like, back when there weren't memes, that you send the 2 Zoltans and they explode. They're terrible. Never do that, particularly against auto ships. Their health is too low, so they won't do the amount of system damage you want them to deal. Anyways, but you start with the teleporter, so you're going to be sending over your Mantis and your human. And then you also have an augment, which you can sell, but it's emergency respirators, which does work on the enemy ships. Some people don't know that. So you can, like I said, do like 5 system damage on the enemy ships before you have to like beam your crew back. You do have a clone base, so you don't need to do that, but if it keeps them safe, then, you do. And this ship starts with 4 crew, 2 being Zoltans. So you actually have some ion immunity options. I hadn't really talked about that before with all the Zoltan ships, but you do have some ion immunity options by putting them into the shield room. Can make some fights safe. And also you generally can kind of fix stuff just because there are so many crew on the ship. Now we're going to start talking about weaknesses. Crow, you didn't mention the artillery beam. Yeah, this artillery it's very bad, but it's not the big problem. The big problem is you have no real way of interacting with enemy ships. Point blank. If they have a medbay and gross weapons, you're just taking a beating. No amount of micro is going to stop it. No amount of skill is going to change the fact that if they have a medical, like if they have a medbay and gross weapons, you're just taking a beating. And if the next ship has a medbay and gross weapons, you're taking a beating. If it just has gross weapons, you're going to get hit. This ship is going to tank damage. It simply is. I know I'm at towards the lower end in terms of like what I consider a safe amount of hull, being like a 22, 23er. I think a lot of people are now seeing it at 24, 25. Not this ship. This is a full repair, every store kind of ship. Because you're going to just take a ton of damage. But we do have the artillery system here. I'd rather have an augment to sell, or maybe even not assist. It gives you an option against Zoltan shields. That's it at 50 seconds. So if it's just like this completely, totally safe fight, you can slowly wait for the artillery to get there. I mean, it technically has some late game applications, but it's not something like, because you already have the teleporter, you really can't be like, oh, like we'll just get cloaking and hacking and hack their weapons and then cloak their volleys and then the artillery is going to do something. No, you don't have the cloaking hacking setup. So that's not super an option. Plus the flak can just like miss because they just dodge it. It's worse than a flak 2. Significantly worse than a flak 2. Yeah, so like I said, you because you don't have a real way to interact with enemy ships, you just take a bunch of damage. Zoltan ships, you can just get hit in a bunch of pieces. If they hack your teleporter, you're just getting hit. Ironically, I guess, or unexpectedly, you really want to fight auto ships. Because it's great, because they can interfere with you. You don't have to worry about med bays, and because you have emergency respirators, you can just punch down their weapons without, being distracted. Oh, but, yeah. Tactically wise, though, do be mindful that you may have to try and send you'll send the human and the Mantis over, and then you send those Zoltans over. And, trying to end fights quickly, you still want to make sure that you have all your crew, because losing crew is practically a death sentence on that ship. But you sometimes it's just like, look, I'm going to take damage. Don't worry about 5%, 10% evasion or whatever it is. Just get my crew over there and send the 2 Zoltans and try and kill them off as soon as possible. Upgrades. Shields. Get shields. Upgrade shields. Sell the augment to get shields. This seems controversial. It shouldn't be. The second shield bubble or buffer point is more relevant against more fights than the augment. It just is. There are times where I've talked about, I don't know which one's better or not, and, the span of all the things. No. There's no way that accelerating to get second shield online at the cost of the augment is going to be a net negative versus holding on to it against auto ships. Just my 2 cents. Now, after you get shields, what are you looking for? Small bomb is really ideal. Small bomb is just because it kind of pairs with what you have. You do have 4 weapon slots, so you can fill them out. Small bomb just gives you that really nice tactical boarding support. You can't buy Artemis. Any missile could just be really helpful in that bind, or a bomb like a breach too. Even an ion bomb. And then for it's hacking. Hacking is just so supportive for boarding systems, for boarding ships, I should say. You just get hacking to kind of help with that, and then just use your weapons to try and get through Zoltan shields. Maybe you get a bypass. This is a ship where you can run shields 3 early. You don't have a lot to buy because you already have 2 systems, and you're kind of okay, here's $80 for scrap or for hacking. So 3 shields in sector 3 is not uncommon. And you can even just start partitioning it out. All right, I got 80 scrap plus 40 scrap. Okay, I got 120. Boom, there's my buffer point in shields. Get to shields 3. Again, you're still going to be taking some damage and ship damage throughout the run. Fed C ends in the D tier, but I think it's kind of at the top of the D tier. It's so debatable. No, the early game is just terrible. At least this kind of functions in the early game. They're very, very similar in terms of inactivity. I can't do it. No. Fed C's here. Fed C gets to be there. Too bad. It's just there's just so many ships that are just dangerous because of their weapon loadouts that you just can't interact with. And just because you can normally tank a bunch and fix it quickly because you have 4 crew, I don't think it gets there. Home stretch, 5 to go. Zoltan C. So the strongest thing about the Zoltan C is it starts with a Zoltan Shield, which prevents like 5 damage. It stops hacking, mind control, or non-event borders. You'll generally keep it for the entire run, though it does sell for 40 scrap if you can get that last final piece that gives you a winning ship. Sell it. You're going to be pretty reliant on it definitely in the early sector. We'll get to that. It starts with a charge ion, which is the best ion weapon in the game. It can self-stack, which means that ion effect lasts for 5 seconds. So if you're firing and impacting the system in less than 5 seconds, you just keep adding ions onto it. It's called ion stacking. And in theory, if they like never dodge, you could take down like 5 shield bubbles. And it starts with a beam drone, which, you know, is like sellable. So in the early going on, much like the Engi A, you can kind of like try and like fire ions at their weapon system to try and disable it, because you can charge up the shots. But normally you're just kind of like firing it, suppressing the shield, letting the beam drone kind of go through their ship at the start. What's bad about this ship is, first off, it is actually still just the weapon setup. On all the other drone ships, like it's not viable strategy wise, stratego wise. We want to just kill enemy weapons, be safe, and fight's over. Like, even if we haven't killed the enemy ship, time wise doesn't matter. It's just, how fast can I make this fight safe? That's like the first and foremost thing you want to do, is you just kind of want to get out of fights. Like, surviving fights is what you want to do. So being able to just take out their weapons, that's the best case scenario. You can't really do that with this ship. And trying to pair things with the ion isn't great. Like, if you get ion blast, ion stunner, awesome. Flak 1 feels a little bit wonky because you don't really have that targeted damage that you want. So, like, if there's just a ship full of, like, 1x2 rooms, you know, it's hard to bring those key systems offline. Again, ships running away can also be a problem because of how the offense, where the mini-beam the beam drone just keeps hitting empty rooms. Beaming! And then the other problem is that you don't have reactor. You start off with like 2 reactor, and then the next 3 reactor costs 30 scrap to upgrade. So you're in this position where it's like, man, I really need to like jumpstart my offense and get that going, but my reactor has like this 10 scrap penalty on top of it also. So to help mitigate that, you really need to be on your micro, and you need to not pop your battery at the start of fights. It's a classic mistake. People get in fights, turn on the battery, power their shield. You got a Zoltan shield. Your shield ain't doing anything. And now you're just wasting reactor. Or now you're just wasting the time of your battery. And that's generally when this ship gets into a bad spot in the early sector, is people pop the battery too early, and then they run out of power and the situation becomes dire. Don't turn the battery on unless you need your shield bubble up. So we have this weird scaling in 2 ways, because again, reactor costs a bunch of money and the weapons feel a little bit off. What are the upgrades for this ship to get you started? Nothing. I've talked with Mike about it, and I floated the idea, and I ran it for a while, that you need to get a weapon buffer to help keep your ion online, because it could potentially disrupt enemy weapons. It's kind of like your offense and your defense, like that you can use to hit enemy weapons and then also take down their shield so the beam drone hits. With really good play, it feels unnecessary. I think there are scenarios where you would pay a price for it. I think those are few and far between versus missing out on potential weapons to get going, because you can't really sell off stuff. I think I sold off the drone in like 25 bucks to get a charge laser online and almost died because of that. Don't do that. Because I just couldn't get any other weapon online, so I was just using a charge laser. No good. Or barely. So you don't get any upgrades. You just have to be really mindful of a reactor. Like I said, don't pop your battery early. Do move your pilot out from piloting to get you reactor. All right. Again, a lot of scenarios where it's just like end the fight because your stuff is powered, end it, win it, versus like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of try and run away while winning the fight at the same time. Sometimes you do need to run, but you got to be really mindful and on point about it. So really the first thing you're doing is you're just trying to find a weapon. Try to find something to kind of pair along with your charge ion. If you find another ion weapon, that's great. You can kind of rock the beam for a while. And again, it's not a death sentence if you get to 2 shielded ships. You just have to remember to charge up the ion for all 3 of its shots so they hit in quick succession and make stacking ions a lot easier. It's also kind of how you do it for crew kills, because I missed that part that you can technically get crew kills by you fire 3 bursts and then a 1 burst with the charge ion, and that way you're only going to hit like 1 shield bubble per 4 shots if you're trying to go for O2 kills, though only if it's like level 1 O2. Level 2 I would say it's not worth the time. So yeah, try to get another weapon. And yeah, that's it. Get a weapon. Hopefully get a weapon. If you have a bunch of extra scrap, you can try hacking, but like Sector 3 is this really tough wall because you want to have 2 shields, and then you're probably going to have to buy a reactor plus this weapon that you got online, and so you could just get hit with this sudden surge of necessary costs. So I put this in C tier, kind of below the Engi ship. I like the Zoltan shield bubble, but it doesn't quite have the same combat tricks as this does, though you do pair along with the charge ion, like you build weapons along with it. The extra reactor cost is it's a pretty severe penalty. It's like, okay, well, this ship just has money, and this ship, like, eats money. So I put it around here in the C tier. Stealth C. Stealth C has really cool weapons and a very cool paint job. I guess that's the best thing about it, is the paint job is really nice. So the Stealth C starts with a charge plus laser, so it's a charge 1, except it only costs 1 power, and a mini beam. So that means the ship has the potential of dealing, against like a shieldless ship, 6 damage, which is like a lot. Of course, if it's shieldless, you're probably firing the charge shots singly anyways, but shh, don't ruin it. The mini beam is efficient, a 1 power weapon that's able to do 2 to 4 damage on enemy ships. Also can start fires. Occasionally that will net you a crew kill, but these are very strong weapons, and it is not uncommon to get something like a flak burst 1 and, well, most like a flak or burst 2, or a charge 2, something with like 3 shots, heavy 2, or not heavy 2, sorry, hull 2, and like hacking and then just win. Like that's just your weapon setup. Very, very small level of investment. There are a lot of sellables on this ship. You start with 2 drones, you start with long range scanners, so that can bring in a lot of money when you get to a store. Weaknesses. This ship has no shields, and despite the fact that it's a stealth ship, it has no cloaking. It survives on its paint job. Yeah, so you have this shield plus drone, which is the shield charge drone, except it's 2 power instead of 3. It's still really bad at 2, it's just better than nothing. And you can't scale into it. Like, you can upgrade your shields, you can upgrade hacking, you can upgrade systems, you know? You can't upgrade the drone so that it, like, I don't know, halves the speed of what it does like shield bubbles. So it's a real problem that you just don't have those systems, so you're very vulnerable, and that you have to spend a lot of money. They're the two most expensive things you can buy in the game. Now, you can win without cloaking, true, and you can technically win without shields. It's always possible. But generally, these are the systems that you want every run. And like I said, they are the most expensive things that you can buy. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, kind of how the ship works. In that, well, no, just a note. With the shield drone, so the shield drone does a layer around your ship, and you get like a Zoltan shield pip. It does it again, and every time it has a layer, it goes slower. Okay? And it calculates that as soon as it starts doing a layer. So if you're against a heavy laser and it starts doing its circle and you get it in pip and it moves a pixel and the heavy laser hits, it's going to do a slower protective bubble loop than what it normally would do. And that's slow enough that the second heavy laser shot can slip in. That's a problem. So what you actually need to do is toggle it off on impact and then toggle it back on. And that way it goes, okay, there's no shield bubbles. Now I'm on the fastest to give you a shield bubble. And this is fast enough to thwart heavy laser ones, which is really important with this ship because heavy laser ones will absolutely annihilate you. That's more so than like any other ship. They will hit you in weapons offline, hit you in drones, and then things go very bad. So you do need to know that tip. The other thing that's kind of difficult about Kestrel C are the stores. You get to a store, and then you're like, do I want shields? Do I want hacking? Do I want cloaking? Do I want a defense drone? Do I get another weapon? There's a lot. I think I would prefer going to get shields first and foremost. Again, it's just a bit of security. Sell long-range scanners if need be. Oh, I forgot that you have an anti-drone. You do have an anti-drone. That was the other sellable I was missing. If of things that I have to hold on to, if I don't have shields, you have to have long-range scanners because hazards are just death sentences. Not 100% of the time, but just, yeah, you know. As far as like the shield drone and the anti-drone, if I can only afford a single, like I can buy the shield system and I get one bubble and I can't get to that second bubble, then I want to hold on to that shield drone. Just sort of, it's kind of niche that it doesn't quite get there. Like a buffer point is not, because I want to have 2 shield bubbles, right? Like I said, we don't have any other real defensive systems there. I don't have a Zoltan shield. I don't have cloaking. I want to get 2 shield bubbles, or equivalent of that. So I will hold on to the shield drone. If I'm getting shields and I have like this option of whether I want to sell the anti-drone or the long-range scanners, I'm going to sell the long-range scanners. The anti-drone is just very helpful against some of the worst fights, which are just offensive drones in bad spots. It's really helpful. And long-range scanners, again, I have like 2 videos talking about how long-range scanners are pretty limited in what they do. And once you got shields, the avoidance of hazards is just really limits its actual value. So yeah, going to a store, like I said, I think shields is 1. I would think weapons is 2. Now, we do get a buffer point in weapons here, much like the Kestrel A, as our first upgrade. Some people argue that they can't afford the scrap for it, that it puts you too far behind. It does not. What's worse is that you just get absolutely chipped out because you get hit in the weapons. The best thing you can do is have your weapons firing and taking out the enemy ships as fast as possible. You will save ridiculous amounts of damage generally by just having a buffer point in weapons. And then you're not pricing yourself out because you just like you save so much on repairs. Like it works. It works out. Again, you can win without doing it. Again, our things are all just like, this wins 98% of the time versus, or this is better 98% of the time versus 94% of the time. Kind of mathing. DD2 or hacking. I think hacking would be next. Again, kind of like buoying up the offense. Of course, if it's selling hacking, I'd rather get shields, but I can't afford shields. Is hacking like acceptable? I mean, being able to hack their weapons and slow them down is pretty nice. Yeah, you be mindful of like where stores are in the sector, how much money you can spend on it. Lastly, you have like a DD2, not a DD1, because you kind of just use the shield drone as a defense drone. It's not great, like unless you know your mic out there and you know all the timings, and so you can let it go at the certain point. So a shot that can your shield absorbs, but then the drone itself. It's just not super worth it. DD2 is kind of interesting. But like I said, you can have some pretty complicated stores with Cell C. Shields, weapon, hacking, then other things are going to be very depending on like what money you have available. And yeah. Is there anything else I want to talk about it strategic-wise? No. Second worst ship in the game. I love this ship. This is, I think, because it has like really interesting stores. But because like most stuff, I go to stores and it's like, oh, I just do this, and that's pretty straightforward. This one is complicated. It is complicated. Rock C. So the Rock C starts with a Crystal Heavy and a 3-power weapon system. It also has a swarm missile launcher. So the Crystal Heavy, it pierces 1 shield, does 2 damage, can be shot down by defense drone 1s. But because you have 1 power piercing through shields doing 2 damage, it's a pretty efficient weapon. And mostly you'll be relying on that to take out enemy ships. You do also have the swarm missiles, is worth noting, because well, they fire kind of like a flak in a reticle. They fire, and they can charge up to 3 missiles, each one taking like 7 seconds. So it's possible you can just fire off a lone missile, snipe their weapons before they have a chance to fire, and create safe fights early on, which is fantastic. When it happens, it can also just miss, and then you're sad. You do have some very nice sellables. You have rock plating, which can sell. You also can sell the swarm missile, but don't. People have been in the past very hungry to sell weapons they do not like. Don't sell weapons because you don't like them. Sell weapons because you don't need them, or like you will die if you don't do something. Like you know, I need scrap now to get something or else. Don't just I didn't like this weapon, yeet it. Don't do that. But you do have, like I said, 2 levels of sellables. The ship also has like a really nice layout. Like it has like tons of venting options, rock crew for some blue options, also a clone bay. As far as weaknesses go, the targeted damage scaling is off, is what I have in my notes. And what I mean by that is, like, you have the crystal, but like once you, again, we talked about like weapon ships, which this is a weapon ship. It doesn't have any other systems. That's a weakness. It doesn't have any other systems, so it's like this weapon ship, and like trying to set up the Crystal Heavy with the starting weapons means you're firing these missiles into a shield system, which again, in a 1x2, they could miss. So you could be in the trying to figure out, like, maybe I have to load up 2 missiles to try and be efficient with it. But that does feel off. You just kind of just need another weapon. But most other ships that I'm going to rank above it, like, have just more consistent dealing with 2 shielded ships or other benefits. Like, your crew are a little bit slow getting anywhere because it's a 2 rock and a crystal. I guess that's kind of about it for weaknesses. I wouldn't say there's like something super glaring. This is another, get your shields up, then try to find a weapon, possibly hacking, and teleporter. You do have 1 crystal with a lockdown, so teleporter can be beneficial here. Picking up a raw teleporter with, Normally you want like a missile support, like a small bomb, an Artemis missile. That makes me feel more comfortable with it, but it could just be that I don't practice it enough. I just haven't been in that scenario enough times to really be like, oh yeah, this totally works. Because like a singular lockdown just doesn't last long. It lasts like, what is it? I think it lasts like 10 seconds, so it's not enough to like solo punch down a system. But again, you have to kind of do that thing where you trap them in the room behind you so that your crew can focus on punching down whatever the vital system is. But you already have Clone Bay, so that generally is preferred for boarding scenarios. But I would just, like, if I can just find a projectile weapon to help set up the Crystal Heavy and then kind of go from there, building a normal weapons ship, that's great. Yeah, like I said, hacking or teleporter as kind of like backup options. So again, I think this is like a B tier ship. It normally doesn't get in trouble in the early sector. It really doesn't get in trouble in the early sector. In a lot of ways, it's eerily similar to Kestrel A, but I think there's just a really significant difference between boarding with 2 crystals and boarding with 1 crystal, 4 crew versus 1 crew, and really stronger weapon systems. Though I think this has more valuables than sellables because like the missiles are like 32 scrap. Yeah. Let's just like put it in B tier. Pretty resistant, and like I said, I kind of prefer ships that are able to survive the early sector more so, and like gives me the chance of winning versus like, some catastrophic failure out of nowhere first jump. I like that being the rarity. And then, give me time for my skill to take over. Slug C. So the strength of Slug C is that it starts with hacking and mind control, but mostly it's just the hacking. So hacking is an incredibly versatile system. It's very flexible. On this ship, we're predominantly going to be using it to slowing down their enemy weapons, hacking their weapons, because our weapon is slow, weapon singular. Paired it with mind control can create some very strong situations. There's a strategy we call the Masala maneuver, which is where you hack and mind control weapons. And what that does is the mind control crew will break the weapons before they get interfered with, as long as it's a 3 crew ship. More crew, the extra crew, interferes because it tries to replace the mind control crew in weapons. Less crew, there's no one in weapons, so that doesn't work. And what this does, aside from that, it guarantees the damage to the enemy weapons. It makes fights very safe, unless they have a Zoltan shield, and it makes getting crew kills very easy, which is a lot of extra scrap. We also start with Slug Repair Gel, which sells for 30 scrap, so we also get a little bit extra money with that. Mind control, we only started with 2 mind control. We started on the boarding ship. Mind control is kind of interesting. Like, by itself, it doesn't really do a lot. I mean, I think you really only see the benefit in conjunction with hacking and sort of like manipulating crew and getting crew kills with it. It can be used to like hit the enemy pilots to try and get your shots to land. But like I said, mostly in the early going, it's just kind of like the Masala maneuver is what you want to really rely on. Just that guaranteed damage to weapons. And then the weapons room kind of becomes a kill room because they're constantly trying to repair it. But because the room is hacked, repair speed is halved. And by the time they almost can fix it, mind control comes back off of cooldown. And also because we start with 2 systems, we're only buying a 3rd system. Generally, that's going to be cloaking. So, what are the weaknesses on the ship? The weapons are bad. You have a chain laser. Chain laser is not a good weapon. It's very slow. It's at 16 seconds. I know it eventually speeds up, but you also only have 2 power weapons, which means if it gets hit, it loses its charge, so you have to start it all over again. And you just get hit while you try and fix it, and then, get ready to fire. It's not generally a problem on the ship because, again, you're going to be hacking enemy weapons much of the time outside of Zoltan shields. There might be some like ships with level 2 cloaking and pretty aggressive weapons that can be a problem. But that's really the only weakness on this ship. It's just that the weapons are slow and it's weak against Zoltan shield. But like everything else, you're generally going to be fine. It's still possible like some shots miss, but again, Masala, you get to do 1 damage. And you get your crew kills. Upgrade. Shields. This is shields first. We do not upgrade weapons. I know I just said weapons getting hit, it goes offline. People think like, oh, well, I want to keep my weapons firing. Nope. Get to 2 shields. Be as safe as possible in fights. And if you get the weapon buffer, the next thing you're thinking about is, well, I now want to upgrade my shields. You can get away with it, though. Because you're hacking weapons, there's not a lot of scenarios that you're going to die with 1 shield bubble hacking weapons. But there are some. And so I would say just upgrade your shields and like you're really safe. Even against Zoltan shielded ships, then you're like, it's harder for them to hurt you, huh? That's great. And yeah, that's it. Because we go into what we need as a weapon. Or I'm sorry, the next scaling upgrade. Oof, getting burnt out here. Is getting a weapon online. We already start with 2 systems. Cloaking is 150. That's not really your first goal to try and get. It's just trying to speed up your weapons or get your weapons going. This is a ship that I don't mind, you know, if you find like a 2-power weapon, like a burst 1, maybe pushing to just get it online a little bit earlier. Give yourself some extra shots. Well, I guess it's the inverse. You would work with the burst laser and then get the chain laser online because it's slower. Yeah, just giving yourself some options against maybe some like Zoltan shielded ships, some pirates that try to like, I don't think pirate ships generally try to run unless you run out of fuel. But anyways, Slug C, I put it just behind the Lanius here, just because the Lanius ship has a little bit better survivability against Zoltan ships because it has the +1 weapons system and the ion stunner. But again, really outside of a very small amount of ships, yeah, the Slug C is fine. And because you're also getting crew kills, generally it's tough to get like, oh, I didn't find a weapon and things get gross. It can happen. So yeah, you get in the A tier. The last ship we talk about is the Mantis C, which is also one of the weirder ships to talk about. Now it has a 4-person teleporter. 4-person teleporter is incredibly strong. I don't know what I would think I don't think it's as strong as hacking. Is it as strong as cloaking? It may be stronger than some of the other stuff. It's so incredibly powerful to be able to send over a bunch of crew. Well, up to 4 crew anyways. And this is a ship that gets crew kills. It, as I said, has a teleporter. You start with a Mantis, Lanius, and Engi. And you have sellables. You have a stun bomb, though I try to hold on to that. Gives you something against Zoltan shields. You have a lockdown bomb. And you have Mantis pheromones. So because you have a 4-person teleporter, it can snowball very quickly. You know, if you're able to stabilize, get to 4 borders, get hackings, bypass Zoltan shields, it doesn't take that much really to get this ship going. And again, because you're crew killing, you can generate a lot of money. The issues with the ship is really early on, you're kind of vulnerable because you don't have a lot of interactivities with the enemy ships. And boarding enemy ships is also complex. It's kind of a 2-parter. So let's start with the first part. You don't have targeting weapons outside of the stun bomb. So stun bomb to like temporarily disable a med bay for like 5 seconds, which then, so you have to stun their crew in the med bay, roll your crew out so they're not hit by it, then roll them back in and try and kill them in 5 seconds before it comes back online. Seems really complicated, because it probably is. I have not particularly practiced well with stun bomb, nor lockdown bomb to my own detriment, really. Anyways, but yeah, so like if they have like really gross weapons and like a medical unit, it can be very difficult to kind of stop them, to just like to hamper their weapons so you're just not getting hit. And like why this is in conjunction with the complicated boarding strategy is like trying to figure out who you send. because against like auto ships, maybe you just send the Lanius because it's safe and it's fine. But maybe you send the Mantis to try and break the weapons because like the timing is better and you'll break them faster so that everything's okay. You could send the Lanius and the Mantis just because it's a normal crew fight and it's only like 2 crew and you can't really find a use out of, and you're just like trying to beat them down quickly. You don't want to wait for the Engi to make it there. Maybe you do need to send the Engi. You have to use not Yakety strats, which is like running around a ship buying time, but Mike Hopley actually came up with this strategy of using like safety dance in conjunction with 1x2 rooms. It's complicated. Where you're fighting in a 1x2 room while kiting your 3rd crew through that room, so you're maintaining their health, but you need them over here because that's you can't do other exploits. Sometimes you want to send 3 crew, so you put one other crew in a 2x2 shield room, and then run other your crew over to weapons to start punching them down, and then rotate one of those crew to shields, and the shields back. And it needs to be a 2x2 room for this to work for the shields. You have to do it in that order, so you keep holding the enemies into the shield room. In terms of like approaching a fight, it is like the most macro intensive and how you want to board enemy ships. And you have that in conjunction with, like I said, not really able to interact with their systems, and like maybe the stun bomb doesn't take things offline. There's a lot of pressure really early on to execute at a very high level. So there's that. That's the pretty big problem, and you never really like get to fix that until you just like find weapons. But as far as then, I guess upgrades, get up shields. Again, we just want to try and be safe, mitigate as much damage as possible. And shields does that, stops death spirals, allows you to get hit in the shields and kind of still prevent things from hurting your ship. Very important. After that, in terms of things you're looking for, buying crew is really strong. Scott 1Z Wilson said in terms of like 4-person boarding ships, crew are like buying a weapon. You may have noted that most ships, I'm like, the first thing you want to do is buy a weapon, not hacking. And so buying a crew is kind of like buying a weapon. Hacking is also a possibility. Being able to just like hack their weapons and give you control over doors, get access to their ship, can make a pretty significant difference. It's also generally what we want on every run, and just provides you with a lot of flexibility. And lastly, would also like just an eye on something that maybe gets Zoltan shields. Now you already have 2 power and weapons, so there's not a penalty there. You do have stun bomb, which technically deals double damage to Zoltan shields. Technically, like it's an option. I think I'm of the mindset, and I think Mike is as well, that you can sell, like if you get like an early store, sell the augment and the lockdown bomb to go ahead and get a shield buffer, but don't like sell the stun bomb, because I don't think you quite get there, because it's just helpful against Zoltan shields. Both those things are things you could practice on and get better with. I don't. I don't. They kind of start only on one ship, and I like disappointing Farp. He's a defender of the stun bomb. So buying crew, buying hacking are both options, or just giving you something to get through Zoltan shields so you can board into them. I will put this in the C tier. I think I put it ahead of Zoltan B. Zoltan B's like they kind of have like scaling wise is both very strong for both of these ships. It's just kind of the early going is like it's really rough, and I've talked a little bit or a lot about kind of like complexity. Like some of these ships have like these micro things that you really need to do, and if you make an argument that this ship wins 100% of the time, you just have to do these 400 micros every fight, pixel perfect, or you lose, it'd be like, well, that can't be the best ship, even if it was technically supposedly can wins all the fight all the time, because it's just too demanding on the player. So I kind of put those ships down here. And this is, like I said, where we kind of end up with ships that it takes a lot of bad RNG to be in trouble on one of these ships. I don't have a recorded loss on it. I have one. I have some. I got like 3 out of 4 runs once with it, but I've changed as a player since then. Ships with really strong, like there's not like like, except for this one having no shields, but there's not like this weakness of like, man, it's just like falls apart and it explodes instantly. It's just kind of like, well, they don't really have any systems going for them early on, or there's like a little bit more leaning towards getting an upgrade to kind of get going than the ones above them. B tier is kind of a mix mash of they have a little bit more vulnerability early because of just like imprecise targeting, or some of the scaling is, as I said, more challenging. Though we end with a ship that has like really great scaling, assuming that it survives. Into sort of the problem childs, which are really underwhelming weapon ships. Like these are all just really underwhelming weapon ships that don't really have any systems to kind of back it up. Ships that are kind of leaning into drones to get going in ions, which are not ideal. Kind of difficult transitions. And this ship is just so ridiculously vulnerable early on. Yeah, so you get towards that. Then these things just have this like built-in inherent problem that is just like, it's just a struggle. You know, like I said, a lot of these things are stable. It's like, oh, you spend 30 scrap and like your ship kind of evens out, or you get this and you're kind of okay. It's like, all right, you need this 90 scrap investment and 80 scrap investment to kind of get these ships in a line with where these other ships going. And then you have Stealth B. And that's it. That's the updated list. No sound problems. Congratulations to me. And thanks for watching. Take care. Good night.